4 bottles of water, 44 sips, and an invisible voice in her head whispering that there would only be more water if 3 people voluntarily shared their last sip. Hannah woke up on a raft made of pieces of a wrecked ship and realized one thing. Here, it's not the strongest who will survive. Here, the one who draws up the right schedule will survive. The first thing she tastes is salt, not on her lips, inside, as if the ocean had been poured straight into her lungs and forgotten to be poured out. She opens her eyes. A centimeter from her face are someone's wet pink sneakers with a unicorn on them. People are yelling at her, in 3 languages at once. Someone is sobbing to her right. Someone is vomiting to her left. Someone is busily rustling plastic bags behind her back. Kana sits up. She adjusts her glasses with one finger. The left arm is cracked and hanging on by a thread. The world is swaying. And not because her head is spinning. The world is swaying for real. She's sitting on a raft, a huge one, pieced together from the remains of what used to be a ship. White debris from the deck, orange life pods, containers on their sides. Everything lashed together with ropes and cables into a single curved platform. The water beneath her is too smooth, too quiet, as if the ocean is breathing slowly and deeply. And somewhere deep below, something is glowing. Hannah tilts her head back. The sun isn't where it should be. The storm began in the evening, so now it's morning, and the sun should be in the east. But it hangs directly overhead, white, motionless, like a lamp in an operating room. She looks down and counts. 1, 7, 23, 44. 44 people, all women. Not a single man, not a single boy. Girls in tattered evening gowns, in staff uniforms, in swimsuits, wearing a single shoe. Teenagers. One is very young, about 14. She's sitting on the very edge of the raft, facing the water, and doesn't move at all. Hannah swallows. Her throat feels like sandpaper. Her last coherent thought slowly surfaces. The Halcyon Star cruise ship. A storm. The deck listing. She's swept overboard. And the last thing she manages to think of before the water engulfs her is something completely ridiculous. She didn't feed her neighbor's cat. And here she is, on a raft made of debris, with 43 strangers. No water, no food, no communication. And then, pale blue text flashes before her eyes. Thin, semi-transparent. The knot is secured. Trust. 0%. Begin. Kana closes her eyes tightly. She opens them. The text is still there. She looks around. No one around her is looking at that spot. No one sees it. Only her. Hannah licks a salty drop from her lip and replies quietly, "Start." The text flashes and disappears. In its place, a line. 1 liter of water available. Condition for unlocking the next resource. 3 people must voluntarily share what they have. She reads it twice and doesn't have time to figure out what it means. Because 20 meters away, 2 women are already tearing a plastic bottle from each other's hands. One is tall, straight back, short haircut. Her flight attendant uniform has burst at the seam on the shoulder but fits like a glove. She holds the bottle with an iron grip and is shouting something sharp in Korean. The other is young, in a wet t-shirt. She's clutching the same bottle with both hands and yelling in English that she found it first. A crowd is gathering around them. 10 people, 15. Someone demands they split it evenly. Someone demands that it be given to those who are worse off. Someone is just yelling. Hannah stands up. Her legs won't hold her. She grabs the edge of the container and walks. Every step feels like walking on a deck during a storm that's no longer there. But her body remembers. She squeezes her way to the center. The tall woman in uniform turns around. Her gaze is stern, appraising. She says she's the senior flight attendant on the Halcyon Star and is in charge of evacuation protocol here. Hannah nods. The flight attendant states that water will be distributed according to seniority. Crew first, then adults, then children. Hannah nods again and quietly asks how much water there is in total. 4 bottles, half a liter each. 1 liter for 44 people, 45 milliliters each. Not even 2 sips. Hannah says calmly, if we distribute it by seniority, some will get water and others won't. And those who don't get any will start fighting in an hour. And there's nowhere to go from here. The flight attendant grits her teeth. She snaps that she's been flying for 20 years and knows how to handle people in a crisis. Hannah replies that she's not arguing with experience. But this isn't an airplane. There's no airport, no base, no rescue team. There's only them and 4 bottles. Silence. A brief one. Then the girl in the t-shirt, who was the first to grab a bottle, says she agrees with the girl in glasses. The flight attendant looks at her. At Hannah. at the crowd, and slowly unclenches her fingers. Not because she agreed, but because she realized the crowd was no longer on her side. Hana picks up on this, and she picks up on something else. Text flashes above the flight attendant's head. Mina Park, 35 years old. Skill, crisis management. Fear of becoming unnecessary. Need for a role. Craves structure. Avoids vulnerability. The text hangs for a second and fades. Hana shifts her gaze to the girl in the t-shirt. Text flashes above her too. Natasha Kim, 19 years old. Skill, biology. Fear of survivor's guilt. Need to be useful. Craves action. Avoids silence. Hana turns her head. A card hangs above every woman on the raft, invisible to everyone but her. 44 names, 44 fears, 44 needs. She stands there with her slipped-down glasses and a cracked temple, seeing right through everyone. Not thoughts, not feelings. Function. Who she'll work well with, who's afraid of whom, who needs what. Just like an employee's card in her aunt's cafe system, Hana exhales and does the only thing she knows how to do. She gets to work. She raises her voice. She doesn't shout. She just speaks loud enough for everyone to hear. 44 people, 4 bottles. That works out to 2 sips each. Not enough to survive. Enough to make it through until tomorrow. And then she suggests something else. Let everyone put everything they have right here. A pill, gum, a lighter, a hairpin, a tampon. Anything. Everything goes into the pile. Nothing will go to waste. And she's the first. Kana takes the chain with her mother's cross off her neck. She places it on the box. She pulls out half a protein bar. She takes out the small bottle of water she'd been hiding under her t-shirt. She looks at the crowd and says she'd been hiding it too. And she asks for silence. A long one. Someone shifts from foot to foot. Someone sniffs. Then one girl steps forward and places a pack of wet wipes on the box. A second one follows. A folding knife attached to a keychain. A third. A pack of pills. A fourth. A lighter and 3 hair ties. One after another. Silently, some with difficulty. 10 minutes later, there's a mountain of 62 items on the box that no one suspected were there. Knives. Pills. Nuts. Sunflower seeds. Sunscreen. A compass. It doesn't work. The needle spins like crazy. A thought flashes through Hannah's mind. Trust, 11%. A spool of fishing line was found. Under the left container. Drinking water, plus 3 liters. A rainwater collector folded inside a piece of tarpaulin. Not noticed before. Course set. Kana approaches the left container. She crouches down. A coil of fishing line lies between 2 planks. Transparent. Strong. 30 meters. She pulls it out and places it on the box. Then she walks to the far edge where the tarp hangs down. Water has collected in a fold. Fresh. Rainwater. 3 liters. She pours it into empty bottles. Behind her, someone whispers that the girl in glasses is some kind of witch. Someone replies that she's just lucky. Mina Park stands to the side and stares without blinking. Her gaze is heavy. Not angry. Like that of a person who was in charge for 20 years and suddenly realized that someone else is in charge now. Hannah catches her gaze. She nods. Not defiantly, like a colleague. And she says one word. Schedule. She snatches a lipstick stub from the pile, dark red. She walks over to the largest piece of white plastic sticking out of the deck and writes, First shift, from dawn until noon. Water collection, 2 people. Fishing, 2 people. 1 person on horizon watch. 1 person for medical checkup. Second shift, until sunset. 3 people repairing the raft. 2 people cooking. 1 person keeping track of supplies. She writes quickly, confidently, just like she used to write the schedules at her aunt's cafe. Only here, instead of who washes the dishes, it's who goes fishing. Instead of break, it's water ration. She finishes. She turns around. 43 pairs of eyes. Some full of hope, some full of distrust, some full of outright anger. A tall, tanned girl in an expensive swimsuit, which when once cost more than Hana earned in a month, asks who on earth appointed this girl as the boss. Hana replies that no one did. and that she isn't the boss. She just wrote the schedule. If anyone wants to write a better one, let them. The girl opens her mouth, closes it, turns away. Next to her are 3 more just like her, tanned, wearing expensive swimsuits, with the faces of people for whom others have always done everything. Hana reads their name tags. 4 friends. Rich cruise ship passengers. Not a single one of them has ever washed dishes in their life. Not out of spite, out of a complete lack of understanding of how it's even done. Hana makes a mental note to herself. Don't get angry. Teach them. Then she looks at the edge of the raft. The teenage girl is still sitting there, facing the water, not moving. The card above her flashes. Julie Morel, 14 years old. Skill, sewing. Fear, feeling useless. Need, silence. Craves ritual, avoids everyone. Hana clenches her teeth. 14 years old, sitting on the very edge, staring into the water. This isn't the posture of someone admiring the ocean. It's the posture of someone measuring the distance. Hana wants to approach her, and stops herself. Not now. Right now, the girl would flinch at any contact. Later. Right now, the main thing is for everyone to eat, to have a drink, and for someone to keep watch because the sun is setting and Hana has no idea what goes on in this ocean at night. She turns to Mina. The flight attendant is still there, arms crossed. Her face is stony. Hana approaches and speaks quietly so that only she can hear. She needs help. She's a student and doesn't know the safety protocols. But Mina does. She needs someone who can properly set up the night watch. Mina stares at her for a long time. Hana sees something flickering in her eyes. Anger, surprise, suspicion, anger again, and something else. Something like hunger. Mina sighs. Fine. But only because without someone on duty, they'll all drown. Not because she likes this girl in glasses. Hana nods. She knows that this is fair. Mina turns around and goes to set up the checkpoints. Her back is straight. Her stride is measured. For the first time in an hour, she moves like a person with a purpose. A thought flashes through Hana's mind. Trust, 14%. 3% for not arguing with Mina, for giving her a role, for asking for help instead of giving an order. And Hana begins to understand the rules. This thing in her head doesn't grant power. It doesn't grant weapons. It doesn't grant magic. It gives hints, like a manager. Put the right person in the right place and the system will reward you. Force someone or lie and the system will punish you. Simple. Brutally simple. The sun is finally setting. Not in the west. To the side. At a strange angle. The sky is flooded with colors Hana has never seen before. Green. Copper. Purple. Like a bruise. A beautiful bruise on the face of a world that has broken. A few girls are watching the sunset. One is crying quietly. Another is holding her hand. A third whispers that they'll go home. Hana doesn't say she doesn't believe it, because that would be a lie. She just doesn't know. And the interface doesn't suggest an answer. Just numbers. Just cards. Just a 14% confidence level. Night falls like a lid. No twilight. A second ago it was light, and now it's already dark. Thick. Damp. And in this darkness, the ocean begins to glow. Hana leans over the edge of the raft and holds her breath. Below, underwater, a jellyfish the size of a bus drifts slowly by. It pulses with a soft blue light. Behind it, another one. And another. Dozens. Hundreds. They're all moving in the same direction. Like a procession. Like a funeral march for something enormous and incomprehensible. Light emanates from them. Enough to see the faces on the raft, and the fear on those faces. Hana straightens up. She adjusts her glasses. She looks up at the sky. The stars are bright, clear, unfamiliar. No Big Dipper, no Orion, nothing. They're not on Earth, or at least, not in the part of Earth that anyone knows. Someone nearby quietly says they want to go home. It's Natasha Kim, 19 years old, a biologist. She's sitting with her arms wrapped around her knees, staring at the jellyfish. Her eyes are wet. Hana sits down next to her. She's silent. Then she says she wants to go home too. Natasha looks at her. Hana says she has a cat at home, or rather, her neighbor's cat. But she used to feed it every day, and now no one's feeding it. Natasha suddenly snorts, not with laughter, something between a sob and a snort. She says that worrying about a cat in the middle of another dimension is really stupid. Hannah says she knows. Natasha snorts again. This time, it's closer to a laugh. Then she quietly says that her friends went out to look for her during the storm, and they didn't come back, and that she should have been with them. Hannah is silent, not because she doesn't know what to say, because she does. She knows that right now she shouldn't speak. She needs to listen. Natasha talks for another 5 minutes or so, in fits and starts, about her friends, about the storm, about how she tried to get back and couldn't. Then she falls silent. She wipes her face. She looks at the jellyfish. She says they're bioluminescent, but they don't come in this size, not in any known species. Hannah replies that it seems like a lot of things happen here that don't usually happen. Natasha nods. She's silent. Then she asks about the schedule. Can she go fishing tomorrow? She wants to see what's in the water here. Hannah says yes. A thought flashes through her mind. Trust, 16%. 2% for listening, for not trying to comfort her, for simply sitting down next to her. Hannah leans back and gazes at the stars above. She's 22 years old, a logistics student. She used to work at a cafe. She's no hero, no leader, no warrior. She's got cracked glasses and wet jeans, and she has no idea what's going on. But she has a schedule written in lipstick on a piece of plastic, and 43 people who need that schedule, and a quiet blue interface in her head that promises that if she's honest and fair, then maybe tomorrow morning they'll find a little more water. Maybe. Hannah closes her eyes. Somewhere on the raft is Lila Reyes, the singer from the bar. She's quietly humming something in Tagalog, a lullaby. The raft sways in time with the music. Jellyfish glow below. Alien stars shine above. And 44 women whom the world has written off lie on the planks in the middle of an impossible ocean, trying to fall asleep. The first day is over. No one died. And that's enough. The morning began with a scream. Hannah jumped up from the planks, not knowing where she was. Then she remembered. The raft. The ocean. 44. One of the rich women was screaming. The one in the expensive swimsuit. She was standing at the edge, pointing into the water. Hannah ran over. She looked down, and she saw a shadow. Huge, long, slowly drifting beneath the raft. Not a jellyfish, something else. Something with a shape her brain refused to piece together into a recognizable image. Too many angles, too little logic. It moved unhurriedly, as if it knew there was no need to rush, as if it knew they weren't going anywhere. A minute later, the shadow disappeared into the depths. It dissolved. The water became just water again, gray-green, smooth, strange. The rich woman in the swimsuit was trembling. 2 friends were holding her by the arms. A third sat on the deck, rocking back and forth. Mina Pak approached them. She said curtly and firmly that a tantrum wouldn't help anyone, that the creature had swum away, that they had work to do. Hannah noted this mentally. Mina was on the job. She was giving orders, keeping everyone in line. Exactly what Hannah wanted from her. The interface flashed briefly. Mina Park, contribution +2. Role partially accepted. Partially. Because Mina wasn't doing this for the group. For now, it was for control. But it was a start. Hannah looked around. It was their first morning on the raft, and she needed to figure out what they actually had. Yesterday's pile on the crate was good, but the raft was huge. Several containers hadn't been opened. The escape pods hadn't been inspected. Pieces of the deck could be hiding anything underneath them. She needed people to conduct a search. She submitted a request. For the first time, she did so consciously. She formulated it clearly in her mind. We need to search the raft thoroughly and find all available resources. The interface flashed. Request accepted. Recommendation: Sophie Chen. Location: Southeastern Edge. Skill: Structural Engineering Assessment. Hannah looked in the indicated direction. At the far edge of the raft sat a girl in a black t-shirt. Short, muscular. Her arms were covered in tattoos. She was fiddling with something in the rescue module's mechanism with a screwdriver. Hannah didn't know where she'd gotten the screwdriver, but the girl was working intently, silently, as if there weren't 43 people in the middle of the ocean, but rather an ordinary workshop. Hannah walked over. She crouched down next to her. The girl didn't even look up. Hannah called her by name, Sophie. The girl froze. She looked at her, her eyes wary. Hannah said she'd seen her working on the module last night and that she needed someone who could assess the raft's construction, what was holding it together, what might fall apart, and where the weak spots were. Sophie was silent for about 10 seconds. Then she asked how Hannah knew her name. Hannah didn't blink.
She said she'd asked one of the girls yesterday.
A half-truth. Dangerous. The interface didn't react. Apparently, the line between a lie and an omission was thin, but it existed. Sophie shrugged. She said the raft was crap, that half the joints were held together by ropes that would rot in a week, that the containers weren't secured but were only pressed against each other by their own weight, that the first serious storm would fix them in half. Then she said she could fix it, if she were given tools and 2 people to help. Hannah said she would provide them. Sophie nodded. She stood up and went to inspect the raft, without further discussion, without questions, without hesitation. The engineer had received her assignment. The engineer was getting to work. Sophie's profile was updated. Fear, intimacy with women. Status, on task. Contribution, potentially critical. Hannah moved on. She spent the next 4 hours walking the length of the raft from one end to the other, getting to know everyone, memorizing, comparing the profiles with reality. The profiles provided only the bare minimum of information: name, skill, fear, need. But real people were more complex than any card. There was Rin Tanaka, 26 years old, former chef. More precisely, sous chef at a restaurant in Portland. The card read, skill, cooking. In reality, Rin was sitting on an upside-down crate, methodically cutting the seaweed that the waves had washed up onto the edge of the raft. She cut it evenly, thinly, professionally. When Hannah approached, Rin said that this seaweed was edible. Not all of it. These green ones are okay, these brown ones aren't. She demonstrated the difference by touch. The green ones were slippery, the brown ones are rough. Hannah asked how she knew. Rin said she'd worked at a Japanese restaurant for 3 years, and that seaweed is actually the most underrated food on the planet, if the planet is still their planet. Hannah offered her the kitchen. Rin looked at her, then at her hands, which were holding the seaweed. Then she said, okay, but she needed a flat surface to prepare it on, and a flame. Hannah said there would be a flame. 2 lighters from yesterday's pile, a metal suitcase lid to serve as a brazier. Rin nodded. There was Ayana Okafor, 24 years old, a nurse. She was found in the corner between 2 containers, asleep, or trying to be. Her face was ashen. The shadows under her eyes were so deep they looked like bruises. Her file said, burnout. Reality showed that Ayana hadn't slept for 3 days, even before the disaster. She'd been working night shifts, 4 in a row. She'd boarded the ship literally right after her last shift. Hannah didn't wake her up, but she placed a bottle of water next to her. A quarter of a bottle. A precious 125 milliliters, and a note written in lipstick on a scrap of fabric. When you wake up, we need you. But first, have a drink and get some more sleep. When she walked past an hour later, Ayana was sitting there, drinking the water in small sips. She was holding the note in her other hand. She was reading it. Hannah didn't stop. She walked past. She gave her some space. A thought flashed through her mind. Trust. 17%. 1%. For the bottle of water and the note. For not waking her up. For writing, sleep a little longer first, instead of get up and go to work. Hannah continued her rounds. There was a group of 4 wealthy women. Their names were Vivian, Clara, Estelle, and Margot. All from Europe. All on the cruise, for the company. The cards all said the same thing. Skill, social interaction. Fear, loss of status. Need, safety. They sat in a huddle and did nothing. Not because they didn't want to, because they didn't know how. Vivian, the very one who had asked yesterday who had appointed Hannah as the leader, tried to help with the water that morning. She grabbed a container, walked to the edge of the raft, and nearly fell into the ocean. They pulled her back. She sat there, wet and red-faced, and very angry, not at the others but at herself. Hannah approached them. She crouched down, not above them but beside them, and said she needed help. Not physical help, but organizational help. 4 people who would keep the records. To write down what they had. How much water, how much food, how many tools. Every day, morning and evening. Vivian looked at her suspiciously. She asked if this wasn't just to keep them busy. Hana replied that it wasn't, that keeping track was the most important thing they could do right now, that without exact numbers, they wouldn't know how much they could eat each day, that one miscalculation and in a week, they'd be starving. It was true. Vivian heard that. She wasn't stupid.
She'd just never been in a situation where stupidity could kill.
Vivian said, "All right." She needed something to write with. Hana gave her a stub of a lip pencil. Vivian looked at it, then at Hana. Then she said that in her past life, she'd done the bookkeeping for the family business, and that she'd had a laptop, and now a lip pencil. Hana said that anyone could use a laptop, but only a professional could use a lip pencil. Vivian snorted. She almost smiled. Almost. Then she turned toward her friends and began giving out instructions. Who would count the water? Who the food? Who the tools? Who the supplies? Hana moved on. A thought flashed through her mind. Trust, 19%. 2%. For finding a role for those whom everyone had already written off as useless. The system rewarded her for including them. For ensuring that no one was left without a task, without a purpose, without the feeling that they were needed. By noon, Hana had made her way around the entire raft. She'd met everyone. She'd memorized 30 names and another 14 from index cards. She'd assigned roles. Kitchen, Rin Tanaka plus 2 assistants. Engineering department, Sophie Chen plus 2 assistants.
Medical station.
Ayana Okafor, but not yet. Once she's slept it off. Accounting, Vivian plus 3. Horizon Watch, 4 3-hour shifts. Fishing, Natasha Kim volunteered first. They gave her a fishing line and a hook bent from a hairpin. Safety and protocol, Mina Park. There were still 20 people left without an assignment. Hana didn't assign everyone at once. People need time. Some just need to sit and breathe and look at the water and try to understand that this is what their lives look like now. She wasn't going to take that time away from them. But one card wouldn't leave her alone. Julie Morell, 14 years old. She was still sitting on the edge of the raft, still facing the water. She hadn't stood up once all morning. She hadn't had a drink. She hadn't eaten. When people approached her, she would shrink back. When they spoke to her, she remained silent. A girl from France. She'd been traveling with her mother. Her mother hadn't been found. Hana watched her from a distance. The card said, clings to ritual. Ritual. A repetitive action. Something predictable. Something that requires no words. Hana thought. Then she remembered. In a pile on the box were threads, a needle, pins. And Hana had hands that, for 22 years of her life, had mended everything that tore because new things were expensive. She didn't go to Julie. Not now. In the evening. Every evening. In silence. With a needle. That was the plan. A long one. A patient one. Like everything that really worked. The day went on. Rin lit the first fire on the metal lid. The seaweed sizzled. The smell was strange. Salty. Like the sea. But it was food. Hot food. The first in 2 days. Rin handed out a small portion. There were no spoons. They ate with their hands. With their fingers. Right off the pieces of plastic. 44 women sat on a raft in the middle of an impossible ocean and ate fried seaweed with their fingers. And it was the most delicious thing many of them had ever tasted in their lives. Because it was food that someone had prepared for them. Not a service. Not a restaurant. Not a delivery. Someone had gotten up, built a fire, chopped it up, fried it, and gave it to them. For free, because everyone was hungry. Hana ate her portion and looked at their faces. Some were smiling, for the first time in 2 days. Some were crying, also for the first time.
Not out of grief, but because of something else.
The feeling that someone had thought of them. Natasha Kim caught the first fish after lunch. A small, strange one with scales that shimmered in colors that don't exist in nature. At least, not in their nature. Natasha screamed with joy across the entire raft. She raised the fish above her head. She ran over to Rin. Rin looked at the fish, then at Natasha. Then she said she had no idea how to cook it, but she'd try. They fried the fish. They divided it into 44 pieces. Each person got a piece the size of a fingernail, but it was fish, protein, life. A thought flashed through Hana's mind. Trust, 22%. Unlocked set of fishing hooks. Location, inside rescue module number 3. Not previously inspected. Hana went to module 3. She opened it. Inside lay a standard emergency kit. Fishing line, hooks, a signal mirror, a compression bandage, water purification tablets. 12 of them. 12 tablets that could turn seawater into drinking water. 1 tablet per liter. 12 liters of clean water. Hana stood over the kit, her hands trembling. Not from weakness, from realization. The system was working. Every time their trust grew, resources appeared. Not out of thin air. They had been there all along. But they were only found when the group deserved them. When they shared. When they helped. When they were honest. Hana brought the kit to the crate. She showed it to everyone. She explained what was what. 12 tablets. 12 liters. For 44 people, that's about 1 glass each. It could last 2 days if they conserved it. Mina Pak suggested distributing the water by the hour. Strictly, according to schedule. Hana agreed. That was Mina's job. The distribution schedule. Oversight. Order. Mina nodded and began writing the schedule. With the same lip pencil. On the same piece of plastic. Next to Hana's schedule. 2 handwritings. 2 schedules. 1 raft. That evening, Hana did what she had planned. She took a needle, thread, and a piece of a torn dress that someone had thrown away that morning. And she went to the edge of the raft. To Julie. Not to her. Next to her. 2 meters away. Hana sat down on the planks, silently, without a single word, and began to sew. Unpicking the old stitches. Trimming the edges. Mending the holes. Her hands remembered the movements. Her aunt's cafe in Seattle. Mended aprons. Sewn up pot holders. Patches glued onto the aprons. Hana sewed and remained silent. Julie sat 2 meters away from her and was silent too. They were silent for an hour. Then Julie turned her head. She looked at Hana's hands. At the needle. At the thread. At the piece of fabric. Hana didn't turn around. She didn't look at her. She kept sewing. Julie turned back toward the water. But Hana noticed. She noticed that the girl had turned. It was the first movement all day that wasn't directed toward the water. That was enough. Hana sewed until dark. Then she put away the needle. She stood up. She left, without saying a word. Tomorrow she'll come again, and the day after tomorrow, and in a week, as many times as it takes. Night 2. The jellyfish were glowing underwater again. But today they'd gotten used to them. Almost. A few girls were even sitting on the edge watching, as if it were an aquarium. Strange, eerie, beautiful. Natasha was sitting there with a notebook. Where did she get? Hana didn't know where she got the notebook. Natasha was drawing jellyfish, counting them, recording their direction, speed, size. The biologist was hard at work. Hana lay down on the planks. She closed her eyes. Trust, 23%. From 16 to 23 in a single day. 7%. 1 rain collection kit. 1 emergency kit. 1 serving of seaweed. 1 fish. 4 rich girls who are now keeping track. 1 flight attendant who's back in charge. 1 nurse who's had a good night's sleep. 1 engineer who's repairing the raft. 1 girl who turned her head away from the water for a single second. Hana knew. This isn't enough. It's just the beginning. Tomorrow will be harder. Tomorrow the water purification tablets will run out, and they'll have to figure out another way to get fresh water. Tomorrow, sooner or later, Mina will want to be in charge again. Tomorrow, the shadow under the raft might return. Tomorrow, someone might break down. But today, everyone is alive. Everyone has eaten. Everyone has had a drink. Everyone has a task, or at least the feeling that there might be one. Today, that's enough. Hana fell asleep under unfamiliar stars. The flickering interface quietly faded in her mind. The raft rocked gently. The ocean breathed. On the 3rd day, it started to rain. Hana woke up from the cold. The raindrops pelted her face, heavy and frequent. She jumped up, and the first thing she did was shout for everyone to gather containers for water. Anything that could hold liquid. Bottles, containers, Pieces of plastic bent into funnels. Fabric spread out horizontally. Everything. The raft erupted with activity. 44 women ran in the semi-darkness under the pouring rain, grabbing whatever they could get their hands on. Some held bottles with the necks pointing upward. Others spread an evening gown between two sticks and collected water in it as if it were a hammock. Some simply stood with their mouths open, drinking straight from the sky. Mina Park commanded the right flank. Her voice was sharp as a boatswain's whistle. She lined the girls up. The filled containers were passed along a chain toward the center. With Fee Chan yelled that container number 2 could be used as a cistern if they plugged the hole in the bottom. She was already knee-deep in water and was plugging the hole with a piece of rubber and someone's sock. Hana coordinated the center. She kept count. 5 liters, 10, 15, 20. The rain was coming down in sheets. Warm, thick, strange. The raindrops were larger than usual, and they had a slight greenish tint. Natasha caught a drop in her palm and sniffed it. She said the water was clean, fresh, uncontaminated, but the color was unusual. Hana said that didn't matter right now. What mattered was collecting it. We'd think about the color later. The rain fell for 2 hours. In 2 hours, they collected 60 liters. 60 liters of fresh water. For 44 people, that's 1.5 liters each. The daily ration. Almost. When the rain stopped as suddenly as it had started, Hanana stood in the middle of the raft, soaked to the bone, and assessed the losses. Half the water had been collected. The other half had been wasted. Because they had no containers. Because they weren't prepared. Because no one had thought ahead that it might rain and that they needed to be ready for it. Hana thought for a moment. Then she gathered everyone together. She said they needed a rain sail. A permanent one. A big one. Stretched out so that every drop would fall into the collection tank and not onto the planks. Sophie said she could build a frame. They'd need poles, ropes, and fabric. A large piece of fabric. Everyone looked at each other. Fabric.
Where would they get fabric on a raft?
And then Lila Reyes raised her hand. She said they had their evening dresses. About 20 of them. Long ones. Synthetic. They don't get completely soaked. If we sew them together, we'll have a sail. Silence. Then someone laughed. Then someone else. Then the whole raft was laughing. 20 evening gowns. Red, black, gold, shiny, with sequins, with slits. Gowns these women had worn to the captain's dinner, to the dance, for photos by the pool. Now they'll be turned into a sail to collect rainwater. Hana smiled too. For the first time in 3 days. Work began immediately. Sophie made a frame out of 2 oars she'd found in the escape pod and a piece of pipe from the railing. Julie, silent Julie, who had been sitting on the edge for 3 days without moving. She stood up. She walked over. Silently, she took the needle from Hana's hands and began sewing the dresses. Hana froze. She didn't move. She didn't say a word. She simply handed her the thread. Julie sewed quickly, confidently. Her stitches were even, tight, professional. A 14-year-old girl from France sewed like a master. The card updated. Julie Morel, skill, sewing. Level, high. Status, active. Requirement, keeping her hands busy. Hana watched her hands, the way her fingers moved, the way the girl's face, for the first time in 3 days, showed an expression other than emptiness. Concentration, not joy, not calm. Concentration, that was enough. The sail made of evening gowns was ready by evening. A golden red-black canvas stretched over a frame of oars. Sophie secured it above the center of the raft at an angle so that the water would drain into the container. It looked crazy. A shimmering sail made of dresses on a raft of debris in the middle of an ocean that doesn't exist. Lila looked at the sail and said it was the most expensive roof in the world. Estelle's dress alone had cost 3,000 euros. Estelle, standing nearby in a t-shirt and shorts borrowed from Natasha, looked at the sail, then at Lila, and said that those had been the most useless 3,000 euros of her life. But now, finally, that dress had come in handy. A few people laughed. Estelle smiled herself. A small victory. The rich girl who'd been sitting around for 3 days not knowing what to do had just joked about her 3,000 euro dress, which was now part of a rain sail. Estelle's card flashed. Fear. Loss of status. Status. Adapting. Hana noted this. Progress. Slow. But progress. By the evening of the 4th day, Hana sat down to do what the system called the shift plan. She closed her eyes and mentally mapped out the next day. Hour by hour. Who's on which task? Who's paired with whom? Who's resting? Who eats first? Who eats second? The interface highlighted the schedule in green. Shift plan accepted. Realistic. Fair. Trust. +1 for each completed item. Green, not red. That means the schedule is fair. That means she didn't overload anyone. She didn't shortchange anyone. Kana exhaled. It was like passing an exam. Every day was an exam. Every day was a schedule. Every day was a test of integrity. On the 5th day, Ayana Okafor finally woke up for real. Not woke up in the sense of opening her eyes. She'd opened her eyes before. But today she woke up like a person who decided to live. She approached Hana that morning and said she was ready to work. Hana looked at her. The dark circles under her eyes had faded slightly. Her back was a little straighter. Her voice was a little louder. Hana said okay, but she had one condition. Ayana frowned. Hana said she needed 2 assistants. Ayana would train them, and Ayana would have days off, just like everyone else. 2 days out of 7. She wouldn't let her burn out again. Ayana looked at her for a long time. Then she said that no boss in her life had ever told her she'd have days off. Hana replied that she wasn't a boss. She was a shift manager, and a shift manager knows that a tired employee makes mistakes, and a nurse's mistakes cost lives. Ayana nodded, slowly. Then she walked off to set up the first aid station. Hana watched her go. The card flashed. Ayana Okafor. Skill. Medicine. Status. Active. Contribution. Critical. Burnout. Controlled. A thought flashed through her mind. Trust. 28%. 5 days. From 0 to 28. Hana didn't know if that was good or bad. She had nothing to compare it to, but she knew that every percentage point came from hard work and the right decisions. And sometimes, simply from sitting next to someone and staying silent. On the 6th day, the first thing happened that Hana couldn't control. An argument. A real one. Not over water. It was over a spot. 2 girls. Keiko and Daria. Keiko, 20 years old, from Japan. Daria, 27, from Ukraine. They'd been sleeping next to each other since day 1. On the 6th day, Keiko discovered that Daria had moved her things. Just a little. 20 centimeters. So she could spread out a piece of fabric she'd found and sleep more comfortably. Keiko exploded. She yelled in Japanese, then in English, that this was her spot, that no one had the right to touch her things, that she had nothing left anyway, and now even this was being taken away. Daria yelled back, that she hadn't touched anything, that she'd just moved it a little, that Keiko was being hysterical. People were gathering around. Hana saw the atmosphere change. 6 days of tension, 6 days of fear, 6 days on boards in the middle of the ocean. It was bound to blow up. And it did. Not over anything major, over 20 centimeters. Hana stepped forward. She didn't stand between them. She stood to the side. She waited until they'd both caught their breath. Then she spoke quietly. She said she understood both of them, that Keiko has a right to her own space, and that Daria has a right to a soft surface, and that they're both right, and neither is angry at the other. They're both angry at the situation. Keiko looked at her. Her eyes were wet. Her lips were trembling. She said she was scared. That's all. She was just scared. And when someone touched her things, she felt like she was losing the last thing she had. Daria fell silent. Then she said she was scared too, that she couldn't sleep on the floorboards, her back hurt, and she just wanted something soft to lie on. Hana nodded. Then she suggested a solution. She would ask Sophie to build low railings between their sleeping areas. Not walls, just a divider, so that each of them would have her own space. Small, but her own. They both agreed. Not happily. They were tired. But they agreed. Hana went to see Sophie. Sophie cursed and said that now she'd have to build not only a raft but also furniture. Hana said yes. Sophie cursed again. Then she went to look for planks. A thought flashed through her mind. Trust. 29%. 1%. For a conflict that hadn't escalated into a fight. Hana realized one more thing. Trust grew not only from help, it grew from resolving conflicts. From the fact that people saw their problems being solved, that they were being heard, that their fear had a right to exist. On the evening of the 6th day, Hannah sat down again at the edge of the raft with a needle, 2 meters from Julie. She sewed in silence. Julie was silent, but today the girl wasn't sitting facing the water. She was sitting sideways, one eye on the ocean, the other on Hannah's hands. It was a movement, tiny, imperceptible to everyone else, but Hannah noticed. Sideways, not with her back to the raft, sideways. Half her face turned toward the people. That was enough. On the 7th day, Hannah used the request for the first time in earnest. She formulated it clearly in her mind. We need a way to desalinate water without tablets, a permanent one, for the whole group. The interface flashed. Request accepted. Recommendation. Sophie Chen. Knowledge. The principle of solar distillation. Additional. Natasha Kim. Knowledge. Properties of polyethylene film. Item. A roll of plastic film from container number 4. Not previously detected. Hannah walked over to container 4. It was rusty, locked. Sophie opened it in 10 minutes using a screwdriver and a piece of pipe. Inside was a wet mess. Soaked boxes, soggy cardboard, and a roll of polyethylene film. Transparent, 20 meters long. Sophie looked at the plastic, at Hannah, at the sun, and said she could build a solar desalination unit. She needed a pit, a container, plastic on top, seawater at the bottom. The sun heats it up. The water evaporates. It condenses on the plastic. It drips into a collection tank. Clean. Fresh. Natasha added that if they used black plastic underwater, it would heat up faster. They had black trash bags from the boxes. Hannah watched the two of them. An engineer and a biologist. 2 skills that, separately, knew half the solution. But together, they knew the whole. The system didn't give her an answer. The second week began with hunger. Not the kind of hunger where you want a snack. The kind where your body starts eating itself. The fishing was poor. 2 or 3 small creatures a day. The seaweed was running out. The ones washing up against the raft were brown. Inedible. Rin said they needed protein. Real protein. A steady source. Otherwise, in a week, they'd start having problems with their muscles, with their minds, with decision-making. Hannah had seen it herself. The girls were moving more slowly, speaking more quietly. There were fewer arguments, not because people had become friendlier, but because they didn't have the strength to argue. That was worse than the arguments. Arguments meant energy. Silence meant exhaustion. She submitted a request. We need a steady source of protein. The interface flashed. Request accepted. Recommendation. Natasha Kim. Expertise. Identification of edible marine invertebrates. Target. A colony of mollusks. Location. Underside of container number 1. Not previously inspected. Hannah found Natasha. Natasha was lying on her back, staring at the sky. Her eyes were empty. Hannah knew that emptiness. The guilt of the survivors. Hunger made it worse. When the body grew weak, the brain began replaying old memories. Her friends. The storm. They hadn't found her. Hannah sat down beside her. She said she needed help, that she thought there might be mollusks under the raft, and that she needed someone who could identify the edible ones. Natasha turned her head. She looked at her. Then she slowly sat up. She said she could do it, but she'd have to dive. Hannah nodded. She said that Mina would set up a safety line, a rope around her waist, held by 2 people. Natasha dove 10 minutes later. The water was colder than it had seemed from the deck, murkier. And down below, in the depths, something was moving. Far away, but it was moving. Natasha didn't look. She looked at the bottom of the container, and she saw them. Mollusks. Dozens. Hundreds. They covered the bottom of the container like a thick carpet. Dark. With iridescent shells. Natasha scraped off a dozen. She surfaced. Laid them out on the deck. Examined them. Sniffed them. She tasted the raw meat. Spit it out. Then she said they weren't mussels. Not oysters. Nothing she recognized. But they had protein. They didn't taste toxic. No bitterness. Worth a try. Hannah looked at her. Then at the mollusks. Then at the 43 women who were watching them. Rin walked over. She picked up one shellfish, cut it open with a knife, sniffed the meat, said she'd fry it. If no one dies in 2 hours, then it's safe. Hannah said she'd try it first. Mina snapped that no, the captain doesn't try things first, that it's stupid. Hannah looked at her. Mina stood with her back straight and her fists clenched, and there was something in her eyes that Hannah had never seen before. Fear. Not for herself, for Hannah. Hannah blinked. The interface flashed briefly. Mina Park, reaching out to Hannah So, knew. Hannah didn't know what to do with that, so she just nodded. She said, "Okay." "Who then?" Rin said it would be her, because a chef has to taste what they cook. Professional ethics. Even on a raft in the middle of nowhere. Rin pan-fried a clam on the lid. She ate it. Everyone waited. 2 hours. Rin sat there pretending she wasn't scared. Hannah sat next to her, pretending she wasn't scared either. After 2 hours, Rin said she was alive, that her stomach didn't hurt, that her head wasn't spinning, that it tasted like rubber chicken with a hint of the sea. But it was food. The raft breathed a sigh of relief. That day, each of them got 2 clams. Small ones, but with protein. Real protein. Rin fried them with the leftover seaweed. She called it seafood stew. Natasha said that was an insult to the word stew. Rin threw a piece of seaweed at her. Natasha dodged it and laughed. The first real laughter on the raft in a week and a half. A thought flashed through her mind. Trust, 37%. 3% for the food. For the risk Rin had taken. For the laughter. Trust grew from laughter. Hannah remembered that. The next 3 days were spent organizing the shellfish harvest. The divers, 3 girls who knew how to swim. Natasha. Keiko turned out to be a former swimmer. And Daria, who had grown up on the Black Sea. The very same 2 who had quarreled over 20 centimeters were now diving in turns, tied together by a single rope. Irony. Mina organized safety posts. When someone was diving, 2 people stood at the edge with the rope, and 1 watched the water, just in case the shadow returned. The shadow didn't return. Yet. On the 10th day, what Hannah had feared happened. Someone stole it. The water. In the morning, they discovered that 1 bottle was missing from the shared supply. Half a liter. Vivian noticed it during the morning count. The numbers didn't add up. Yesterday, there had been 12 liters. Today, 11 and a half. Half a liter missing. A bottle. Vivian reported it to Hannah. To Hannah, not Mina. That was important. It meant that even the rich girl who, 10 days ago, had asked who had appointed this girl as the leader, was now coming to her with a problem. Hannah stood in front of the water crate and thought. 1.5 liters isn't much for the group. It's a lot for one person. Whoever stole it was desperate for a drink. Or desperately afraid there wouldn't be enough water. Or both. Hannah could keep quiet, not tell anyone. Find the culprit using the cards. Talk to her quietly, alone. Solve the problem without a fuss. That would be effective. That would be smart. That would be painful. The interface flashed a warning, in red. Warning. Withholding information from the group reduces trust. -5% upon discovery. -5. They're at 37. -5 is 32. A setback of 4 days. A loss of resources. A loss of everything they'd built in a week. Hannah closed her eyes. She exhaled. Then she gathered everyone. 44 women stood on the deck, and Hannah told the truth. She said a bottle of water was missing, that someone had taken it during the night, that she didn't know who. Silence. Heavy. Their expressions shifted. Surprise. Anger. Suspicion. Someone looked at the rich women, someone at the newcomers, someone at those who had slept closest to the supplies. Hannah raised her hand. She waited for the commotion to die down. Then she said she wouldn't look for the culprit. She wouldn't investigate. She wouldn't punish anyone. Because whoever took it did so out of fear. They were all afraid. And every one of them had thought at least once over the past 10 days about hiding something for herself. She had thought about it herself. She had hidden water on the very first day. She had already spoken about it. The silence was different. Not angry, thoughtful. Hannah continued. She said that instead of punishment, She was proposing a solution. Access to water would be on a schedule, twice a day, morning and evening. Each person would receive her portion from the person on duty. At night, the supplies would be locked away. Mina had the key. Not because she didn't trust the group, because it was easier that way. Not to think about water at night when she was scared. Mina nodded. She took the key. Her face was stony, but her eyes said, "Thank you." For the role. For the trust.
For the fact that Hana had given her the key and not someone else.
Then a quiet voice from the back rose. One girl, Mia, 21 years old, quiet, unobtrusive. She raised her hand. She said it was her. She took the bottle. At night. Because she wanted a drink so badly she couldn't think straight. And that she was ashamed. Silence. Everyone was looking at Mia. Hana walked over to her, looked her in the eyes, said she was grateful for her honesty, that it took courage, and that the bottle was gone, but the courage remained. Mia cried. Quietly, silently. Standing in front of 43 women who were looking at her. Rin was the first to approach her. She hugged her, then Natasha, then someone else. Then Mia stood in a circle of arms and cried, no longer out of shame, but because they hadn't cast her out. A thought flashed through Hana's mind. Trust, 42%. Spike, voluntary confession, group forgiveness, unlocked, first aid kit, location, dual D of rescue module number 2. 42%, a 5-point jump for a single conversation, for honesty, for confession, for forgiveness. Hana walked toward the rescue module, her head spinning. Not from hunger, from the realization of how this system worked. It didn't demand perfect people. It demanded honest people. Mistakes were normal. Theft was normal. Fear was normal. What mattered was what you did about it afterward. You admitted it. You forgave. You moved on. The first aid kit from Module 2 was small but priceless. Bandages, antiseptic, painkillers, 12 paracetamol tablets, band-aids, burn ointment. And Yana treated the first aid kit like a newborn. Carefully, gently. She counted every item, made a list, put it away in her corner. She told Hana that with this, they'd last longer. Not forever, but longer. The 11th day. Sophie finished the first major repair of the raft. She replaced the rotten cables with new ones braided from fishing line and rope. She reinforced the joints between the containers. She drove supports into the weak spots. The raft became sturdier, stronger. It rocked less. Everyone noticed this. Before, the deck would shake violently with every wave. Now it just swayed. Gently. Steady. Like a house. Sophie stood in the middle of the raft, caked in rust and sea salt, and looked at her creation. Hana walked over. She said the raft was different now.
Sophie shrugged.
She said it was a piece of shit, not a raft, but crap that won't fall apart. Hana smiled. She said thank you. Sophie turned away, quickly, but Hana noticed. Her ears turned red. Sophie Chen, mechanical engineer. Tattoos. Swears like a sailor. Doesn't know how to accept gratitude. Blushes to her ears at a simple thank you. The card flashed. Sophie Chen, connecting with Hana So. New. The second new one this week. First Mina, now Sophie. Hana didn't know what to make of it, so she just nodded again and moved on. She didn't have time to think about it. She had fish to distribute, a schedule to write, a desalination unit to check. A girl at the edge of the raft who, for the first time today, was sitting with her back to the water. With her back to the water, facing the raft. Julie Morell, 14 years old, 11 days of silence. But today she was sitting facing the people, and sewing, silently, with the needle Hana had given her. She was sewing a patch onto someone's shirt. Not her own, someone else's. She was doing something for someone else. Hana stood 10 meters away watching her, and it took a tremendous effort not to cry.
Because a shift manager doesn't cry.
A shift manager makes the schedule. A shift manager solves problems. A shift manager doesn't stand in the middle of the raft with wet eyes because a 14-year-old girl had sewn up someone else's shirt. Hana adjusted her glasses. The thread on the temple was holding fast. She went to write up tomorrow's schedule. Day 12, 13, 14. The second week was coming to an end. Trust stood at 44%. Two workshops were running smoothly, the kitchen and the engineering shop. The medical station has been set up. Records are being kept. Duty shifts are being carried out. People are starting to get used to it. Not to the ocean, to each other. That morning, Rin and Natasha were arguing about which seaweed was better to fry and which to dry, and it sounded like a debate between two chefs in a restaurant kitchen rather than two hungry women on a raft. Mina conducted her morning rounds with such seriousness that it was as if she were inspecting an airliner, and everyone had long since stopped laughing at it because the rounds were actually working.
Sophie found 5 pieces of copper wire in a container and daydreamed aloud about how they could be turned into a fishing hook or a signaling device or many other things. Lila sang every evening. Not for anyone else, just for herself. But everyone listened, and the raft fell silent and rocked in time with the music. The end of the second week, the 14th evening. Hannah sat on the edge of the raft, alone. She watched the sunset. Green, copper, purple. Every evening the same impossible colors. Ayana sat down next to her, silently, just as Hannah used to sit next to Julie, without words, without questions, just there beside her. 5 minutes later, Ayana said quietly that Hannah should eat more. Hannah turned to her. Ayana said she was a nurse and could tell. Hannah gave part of her portion to others, every day. She thought no one noticed. Ayana noticed. Hannah wanted to say that wasn't true. Then she remembered the rule, a lie minus trust, even a small one, even to herself. Hannah said yes, because some people need it more. The third week brought sales. Hannah was the first to see it. Black, triangular, on the horizon, far away, motionless, as if cut out of paper and glued to the sky. She stood at the morning lookout post and stared at it without blinking. There was almost no wind. The ocean lay like a flat gray-green plate, and at the edge of that plate stood a black triangle. Hannah called Mina. Mina approached. She looked. Her face froze. She said it was a sail. Hannah nodded. Mina said there are 2 kinds of sails, those seeking help and those seeking prey. Hannah asked how to tell the difference. Mina said there was no way. Not until they get closer. They didn't get closer. The sail remained on the horizon all day. It didn't move. It didn't get closer. It didn't go away. It just stood there and watched. Hannah submitted a request. She needed information about other rafts in this ocean. The interface flashed. Request denied. Insufficient data. Recommendation. Observation. For the first time, the system didn't provide an answer. Not because it didn't want to, because it didn't know. Hannah stood at the edge of the raft and looked at the black sail, and for the first time, she felt a fear she couldn't turn into a task. Nothing to plan, nothing to organize, just stand and wait. By evening, the sail had disappeared. It dissolved into the sunset, As if it had never been there. But Hannah knew it had been there,
and she knew it would return. She gathered the key people, Mina, Sophie, Ayana, Rin, Natasha, Lila, Vivian. 7 people. They sat in a circle on upside-down crates. The first meeting. A real one. Not an announcement. Not a schedule. A meeting. Hannah told them about the sail. Everyone was silent. Then Mina said they needed defenses. Weapons. Guard posts. A retreat plan. Sophie said she could make spears out of pipes. Rin said she had knives. Natasha said they could set traps. Lila was silent. Vivian was silent. Ayana was silent. Hannah raised her hand. She waited. Then she said they wouldn't fight. Mina turned sharply toward her. She asked, "What then?" Hannah said that they didn't know who was on that raft. They didn't know what they wanted. They didn't know how many of them there were. The only thing they knew was that the sail had been on the horizon all day and hadn't come any closer. That meant they were watching, studying them. If they'd wanted to attack, they would have done so right away. Mina clenched her teeth. She said that Hannah was naive, that in a crisis, the one who strikes first survives.
Hannah looked her in the eyes. She said no. The ones who survive are the ones with a team. They have a team. They have 44 people who've spent 2 weeks learning to work together. And if they start making spears and setting traps now, they'll stop being a team. They'll become an army. And an army needs an enemy. And if the enemy doesn't come, They'll find one among their own. Mina was silent. For a long time. Then she said that Hana was either a genius or an idiot, and that she was hoping for the former. Hana said she was hoping for that too. Sophie snorted. Ayana quietly said she supported Hana. Rin said she was a cook, not a soldier. Natasha said that spears made from pipes were still a stupid idea because the pipes were needed for the desalination unit. Leela said that if anyone came, she could sing them a lullaby and put them to sleep. Everyone looked at her. Lila shrugged and said it was a joke. Probably. The meeting ended with a decision. Step up surveillance. Double the night patrols. But don't make weapons. For now. Hana added one word. For now. Mina. That for now was a compromise. A small one, but a real one. A thought flashed through her mind. Trust. 46%.
Joint decision.
Compromise. 2% for not pushing her position through. For leaving that for now. For the fact that Mina left the meeting not defeated but heard. The sale hadn't returned for 3 days. Life went on. The desalinator was already producing 3 liters a day. Sophie added a second container. Rin found a way to dry mollusks in the sun and turn them into something resembling jerky. Natasha began cataloging all the forms of life she saw in the water. Jellyfish. Fish. Mollusks. Algae. She kept notes in a notebook she'd found in someone's suitcase. In small handwriting. With drawings. Just like a real field biologist. On the 18th day, Julie spoke. It happened in the evening. Hana was sitting on the edge of the bed with a needle, as usual. She was sewing. Julie was sitting next to her. She was sewing too. Silently. Just like every evening for the past 11 days. Then Julie said one word. Quietly. Almost in a whisper. She said, Merci. Hana didn't turn around. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry even though she wanted to. She just nodded. She kept sewing. Julie fell silent again. But that word hung in the air like the first fire in the darkness. One word. 11 days of silence and one word. A thought flashed through her mind. Trust. 48%. Event. Restoration of speech. Julie Morel. Critical point passed. Hana sewed and bit the inside of her lips so hard she could taste blood. Because if she'd allowed herself anything other than calm, she would have fallen apart. Right here. On the planks. With a needle in her hand. On the 19th day, the shadow returned. Not a shadow. Shadows. There were 3 of them. 3 enormous shapes slowly glided beneath the raft in the depths. Natasha stood at the edge and counted. 3. Each as long as a container. Maybe longer. They moved in sync. Like a flock. Or like parts of a single entity. Hana stood beside her. She looked down. This time she didn't look away. The shadows weren't black. They were dark purple, with pale spots that pulsed slowly. Like a breath. Or like a thought. Natasha said quietly that they weren't dangerous. Hana asked how she knew. Natasha said she didn't know. She just felt it. Hana looked at her. Natasha stood there with a notebook and pencil, sketching the shadows. Her hands didn't tremble. Her eyes were clear. Not frightened, curious. The biologist saw no threat. She saw an unknown species. Hana remembered the index card. Seeks, action. Avoids, silence. Natasha was in action, observing, taking notes, working. Fear faded when her hands were busy. The shadows left an hour later, just as quietly as they'd come. But this time they left something behind. Fish floated to the surface, 10 of them. Large, silvery, dead. As if something below had pushed them up. Like an offering, or a test. Rin looked at the fish, at Hana, at the water. She said she didn't know if it was safe to eat. Hana ran a scan. The fish was safe to eat. The interface flashed. Insufficient data, external source. System cannot evaluate. The system didn't know. Hana looked at Natasha. Natasha was already holding one fish in her hands. She was examining the gills, the eyes, the scales. She sniffed it. She said there were no signs of toxins. The gills were clean. The eyes were clear. The scales were intact. But she added that this didn't guarantee anything because it wasn't an earthfish. and Earth's rules might not apply. Kana thought. 10 large fish. That's 3 days' worth of meat for all 44 of them. If it's safe. If not, it's food poisoning for 44 people. They have 1 nurse and 12 paracetamol tablets. The risk is enormous. Rin volunteered again. Hana said no. Rin had already taken a risk once. Now it was someone else's turn. She turned toward the raft. 44 women were watching her. Hana told the truth. She said she didn't know if the fish was safe, that the system hadn't told her. No, she didn't specify which system. She just said she wasn't sure, that they needed a volunteer, just one. Someone who would try it, and who knew it was a risk. Silence. A long one. Then Mia raised her hand. The very same Mia who had stolen a bottle of water 4 days ago. She said she wanted to try it. Everyone looked at her. Mia stood before them, small and thin, her face flushed. And she said she wanted to do something useful, that she wanted to give back what she'd taken. Not the bottle, trust. Hana looked at her for a long time. Then she nodded. Rin fried a piece of fish. Mia ate it. Everyone waited. An hour. 2. 3. Mia sat in the medical corner under Ayana's supervision. Ayana checked her pulse every 15 minutes, her blood pressure, her temperature, her pupils. After 3 hours, Mia said she felt normal. After 4, she said she felt good. After 5, she said she wanted more. The raft let out a collective sigh. Rin grilled fish late into the night. The smell hung thick and rich over the water. Each of them got a piece the size of a palm. Real meat. White, tender, delicious. So delicious that some of them cried. Again, they cried often on this raft. But less and less from grief, and more from something else. A thought flashed through her mind. Trust. 51%. The halfway mark has been crossed. New phase. Unlocked. Container section number 6. Contents. Tools. Hammer. Saw. Set of nails. Duct tape. 3 rolls. 51%. Half. Kana stood in the middle of the raft at night. Jellyfish glowed below. Foreign stars shone above. And 51% trust flashed in her mind. She didn't know what new phase, but she knew that they now had a hammer, a saw, and nails. Sophie will find out and be happy. On the 20th day, the sail returned. Closer. Much closer. Not on the horizon. 1.5 kilometers away. Hana could see it clearly. A black triangular sail on a small raft. Smaller than theirs. About 3 times smaller. There were figures standing on it. 5. Maybe 6. All dressed in dark clothes. Their faces were indistinguishable. Mina was there in a second. She said they were scouting. That this was a reconnaissance mission. That the next visit would be closer. And after that, an attack. Hana was silent. She watched. The figures on the black raft stood there and stared back. They didn't move. They didn't wave. They just stared. An hour later, the raft with the black sail turned around and sailed away. Slowly, without haste, knowing it would return. Hana called a meeting. The second one that week. The same 7. Mina said they needed to prepare for battle. Hana said they needed to prepare for a conversation. Mina asked what if the conversation didn't work. Hana replied that then they would defend themselves. But first, the conversation. Mina shook her head, but she didn't argue. She was beginning to realize that arguing with Hana was pointless, not because Hana was stubborn, but because Hana usually turned out to be right. It was infuriating, but less so than it had been less than 2 weeks ago. Hana asked Sophie to make a signal flag. White, big, out of whatever they could find. Sophie asked why white. Hana said that white means we want to talk in any language. Sophie said that was naive. Hana said it was all they had. Sophie made the flag out of an old sheet she found in one of the suitcases. White, with a single coffee stain in the corner. Hana hung it at the highest point of the raft, the top of an upside-down shipping container. A white flag on a raft made of debris. In the middle of a foreign ocean. Ridiculous. Or brave. Or stupid. Hana didn't know which of the 3. On the 21st day, Hana saw an interface message for the first time that wasn't related to trust. She woke up in the middle of the night because text was flashing in her head. Bright. Fast. Like a program glitch. Node. Hana So. Previous node. Ayame Kuroda. Status. Lost. Hana sat in the dark, reading those words over and over. Previous node. Someone had done this before her. Someone else had seen this interface. Seen the cards. Seen the trust. And that someone. Lost. Not completed. Not transferred. Lost. Ayame Kuroda. A Japanese name. A woman. Another body. Another group. Another story. One that ended. Badly. Hana lay in the dark, breathing slowly. 43 women slept around her. Quiet breathing. Snoring. Sleep-talking. Someone was crying quietly. Someone always cried at night. Jellyfish glowed below. Stars shone above. And between them lay a girl with her glasses slipping down her nose, who had just learned that she wasn't the first, and that the first one hadn't made it. The interface flashed once more, briefly, as if apologizing. Display error, data archived. Then it went dark. Hana closed her eyes. She didn't fall asleep until morning. In the morning, she got up. She adjusted her glasses. She wrote out the schedule. She checked the desalinator. She talked to Rin about supplies, to Mina about duty shifts, to Sophie about new tools, to Ayana about the health of the 3 girls who were showing signs of dehydration despite all their efforts. She did what she did every day, because it had to be done every day, because 43 people were waiting for the schedule, waiting for order, waiting for someone to say this and next, and tomorrow we'll do this. And that someone was her, the girl from the cafe in Seattle, with a cross-stitch and glasses on a string. The shift manager who woke up every morning thinking the same thing. No one should die on my shift. The interface flashed quietly. Trust, 52%. Node, stable. On the 22nd day, they arrived. Not with one black sail, with two rafts. Smaller, fast, skimming low over the water. They emerged from the morning fog like 2 dark fish and stopped 300 meters from the Halcyon. Hana stood at the bow. Mina stood beside her, straight as a pole, hands behind her back, her face stony. Behind them stood 10 more women, all who had volunteered. The remaining 33 were below deck, not hiding, just waiting. Hana looked at the white flag. It hung from the container. A coffee stain in corner had darkened slightly from the salt. No one was moving on the black rafts. The figures in the darkness stood and watched. 1 minute, 2, 5. Then a voice came from the front raft. A woman's voice. Low, with an accent Hana couldn't place. The voice said they liked the white flag. Nice, Mina said, flinching. Hana placed her hand on Mina's shoulder, gently. Mina froze. Hana replied loudly. She said they wanted to talk. The voice from the raft laughed. It said talking was good. Then it asked what they had. Hana said that they had 44 people and a raft that was holding up. The voice was silent for a moment. Then it said that they'd seen their desalination unit. They'd seen the fire. They'd seen them catching fish. And that they wanted to share. Mina whispered to Hana that she'd told her so. Hana didn't answer. She looked at the black rafts and counted. 5 figures on the first one. 4 on the second. 9 people. Against their 44. But 9 who had come. Who had chosen this life. Who were used to taking. Hana shouted back. She asked what they were offering in return. Silence. A long one. The voice on the black raft apparently hadn't expected that question. Then the woman laughed. A different kind of laugh. Not a mocking one. A surprised one. She said that rafts don't usually bargain. Usually, rafts just give things away. Hana said they weren't an ordinary raft. Silence again. Then a small boat was lowered from the black raft. A rowboat. A single woman sat in it. She rowed slowly toward the Halcyon. Her hands were steady. Her back was straight. When she rowed closer, Hana saw her face. Around 40. Weathered. Tanned to a dark bronze. A scar running from her temple to her chin. Her eyes were gray and completely empty. The card flashed. Hana flinched. The card was different. Not blue. Gray. Dull. Like a burned-out screen. Rachel Stone, 41 years old. Former node. Status. Deactivated. Skill. Survival. Fear. No data. Need. No data. Former node. Hannah read that twice. Former. This woman, this Rachel. She used to be like Hannah, once upon a time. She had an interface, cards, trust, and she lost it. Status. Deactivated. Rachel swam up to the side of the ship. She looked up at Hannah, for a long time, appraisingly. Then she said that Hannah was young, that they were usually young. Hannah didn't answer. Rachel climbed aboard. Mina stepped toward her. Rachel looked at Mina, then at Hannah, then back at Mina. She said they had good security. Mina said she wasn't security. She was the head of security. Rachel raised an eyebrow. She said, "Well, I'll be." Titles, positions, civilization. She looked around. She saw the desalination unit, a sail made of dresses, a schedule written in lipstick, a first aid corner, the kitchen, a shellfish dryer. Hannah saw her expression change, not surprise, not envy, recognition, as if she'd seen something she remembered, something she'd once had. Rachel turned to Hannah. Her voice grew quieter, harsher. She said she wanted 10 liters of fresh water, 5 kilograms of dried clams, and a roll of plastic wrap. Hannah said she'd give her the water, 5 liters, not 10. 2 kilograms of clams. She wouldn't give her the plastic sheeting. The sheeting was needed for the second desalinator. Rachel narrowed her eyes. She asked what she'd get in return. Hannah said information. About this ocean, about other rafts, about what lives in the depths, about how those who've been surviving here for a long time managed to survive. Rachel looked at her. For a minute. Maybe longer. Then she sat down right on the deck. She crossed her legs. And she began to speak. She spoke for an hour. Hannah listened. Mina listened. Ayana listened. Everyone nearby listened. Rachel explained that this ocean goes by different names. Some call it nowhere. Some call it oblivion. Some call it the bowl. She calls it the dump. Because this is where they dump those who aren't wanted. She's been here for 11 years. She ended up here when she was 30. Not from a ship, from a bridge. She was standing on the railing. She took a step, and instead of the river, she found herself here, on a small raft, alone. Then others appeared, then the interface, then the cards, then trust. Hannah listened and a chill crept through her. Rachel went on. She said she'd had a raft, 23 women. She was the hub. For 2 years, she'd been building the same thing Hannah is building now. A schedule, roles, trust. Then a storm came. A big one. A real one. Not like the ones before. A storm that lasted 7 days. On the 4th day, their supplies ran out. On the 5th, people started dying. On the 6th, Rachel decided she'd save more people if she lied. She told the group she could see land, that they needed to sail east, that she was sure. She wasn't sure. She couldn't see a thing. She just wanted to give them hope, so they could hold on for one more day. The interface shut down instantly. Trust, 0%. Node, critical error. Lie detected, system deactivated. Resources ceased to exist. The gauge died. The cards went dark. Rachel was left without the only tool that had helped her keep the people together. 3 days later, her raft fell apart. Of the 23, 9 survived. The 9 who were now standing on the black rafts. Those who chose to follow her even after she lied. Or maybe precisely because of that. Hannah sat and listened, and one word echoed in her head. Lost. Ayame Kuroda. Status lost. That's what happened to Ayame. Or something like that. A lie for the greater good. A lie for salvation. A lie that destroys the system. Rachel fell silent. She looked at Hannah. She said she knew Hannah could see the cards. She knew Hannah had the interface. She knows because she remembers how it was. And she gives her one piece of advice. For free. Don't lie. Ever. Not once. Not for anyone. Even when it seems like a lie will save you. Especially then. Because the system doesn't forgive. Not once. Hannah nodded. Rachel stood up. She brushed off her pants. She looked around one more time. Her gaze settled on Julie. The girl was sitting at the edge, sewing. Rachel looked at her for a long time. Then she said quietly that she'd had one like that too. Small, quiet. She hadn't been able to handle her either. Hannah didn't ask what couldn't handle meant. She didn't want to know. Not yet. Rachel went down to the rowboat. Hannah handed her the water. The clams. Everything as agreed. Rachel took them. She was silent for a moment. Then she said one last thing. She said that when the shadows rise, don't be afraid. They don't touch those who aren't afraid. Then she rowed back. The black rafts turned around and left. Quickly, like fish returning to the depths. Mina stood next to Hana and said nothing. Then she quietly said that Hana was right. Talking is better than fighting. This time. Hana nodded. She didn't say, I told you so. Not because she was above it, because she was scared. 11 years. Rachel had been here for 11 years. A lie to save them, and everything came crashing down. Hana thought about it all day, all evening, all night. The interface displayed trust, 54%. External contact, concluded peacefully. Resources lost, minimal. Reputation, established. Reputation. They were now on someone's map. A raft where no one goes hungry. A raft with a desalination unit. A raft with a white flag. That was good. And dangerous. Because Rachel wasn't the only one sailing this ocean. The first month ended quietly. No celebration, no speeches. Just someone saying in the morning that today was the 30th day. And everyone fell silent.
30 days on the raft.
30 days in an ocean that shouldn't exist. 30 sunrises in the wrong place. 30 sunsets of impossible colors. 30 nights under unfamiliar stars. Hana stood by the schedule and looked at the piece of plastic covered in lipstick. The lipstick had run out long ago. Now they wrote with charcoal from the campfire. The schedule had grown. It had spread. It took up the entire piece of plastic and spilled over onto the next one. 3 shifts a day. 22 positions. 6 departments. Kitchen. Engineering. Medical. Intelligence. Records. Maintenance. Mina came up with that last word. Maintenance. Cleaning. Fixing little things. Laundry. Yes, they now had laundry. Lila organized it. With seawater. Then a rinse with fresh water. Then drying on lines stretched between the containers. The clothes smelled of salt and seaweed but were clean. That mattered. More than Hana thought. Clean clothes meant order. Order meant control. Control meant that the world hadn't fallen apart. Even if this world was a raft in the middle of nowhere. Hana gathered everyone. All 44 of them for the first time. Not a meeting of key members. A general assembly.
They stood on the deck.
Sat on crates. On shipping containers. On planks. 44 women. Dirty, thin, tanned, weather-beaten, and alive. All 44 of them. Not a single one lost. Hana stood on a crate in the center. She adjusted her glasses. Julie's thread was still attached to the temple. She said she wanted to propose something. Her voice didn't tremble. She'd learned to speak in front of them over the course of 30 days. She'd learned to stand on the crate without feeling like an imposter. Almost. She said they'd held out for a month. That it was longer than any of them could have imagined on the first day. That they'd built a kitchen, a desalination unit, a medical station, a duty roster system, and even a laundry facility. And that now she felt it was time to take the next step. Everyone was watching. Hana said it was time to choose. She shouldn't be in charge just because she was the first to write the schedule. They had to decide, together, who would be captain, by vote, an open vote. Mina stepped forward. Hana saw it out of the corner of her eye. She saw her shoulders twitch, her back tense. Mina had been waiting for this moment. 30 days.
But then Mina stopped.
She didn't nominate herself. She stood there and said nothing. Hana waited. Natasha raised her hand. She said she was nominating Hana. Rin raised her hand. She was for Hana too. Sophie didn't raise her hand but simply said, well, who else? Ayana nodded. Vivian said she was voting for Hana, and that if anyone thought she could have done better, they should try keeping track of things with lipstick on plastic every day at a temperature of 35 degrees. Hana turned to Mina. Mina stood with a stony expression. She was silent. Then she slowly raised her hand. The vote was quick. 39 out of 44 votes were for Hana. 3 abstained. 2 voted against. Hana didn't ask who. It didn't matter. What mattered was that the decision was unanimous. Not hers. Not the system's. Theirs. She stood on the crate and wanted to run away. To jump down. to go to the edge of the raft and sit next to Julie and sew in silence. But she couldn't, because 39 people had just told her they believed in her, and that was harder to bear than any storm. Hannah said thank you. Then she said the captain would have one condition.
She's the captain as long as the group wants her to be.
At any moment, anyone can call for a new vote, and if the majority says no, she'll leave. No hard feelings. No arguments. That will be the law. The first one. Mina nodded quietly. There was something new in her eyes. Not anger, not envy. Respect. Genuine. Heavy. Hard-won. Hannah saw it and felt something shift inside her. A small piece of the wall she'd been keeping between herself and Mina. It cracked. A thought flashed through her mind. Trust, 59%. Event, democratic legitimacy. Bonus, the rule of replaceability, plus 5%. 5% for a single rule, for giving them the right to remove her. The system didn't reward power. The system rewarded the willingness to relinquish power. Hannah climbed down from the crate. Mina approached her. Silently, she held out her hand. Hannah shook it. Mina's hand was stiff, dry, strong. Hannah thought that this hand had spent 20 years, had been opening emergency exits, setting tables, and holding the helm. And not once in those 20 years had anyone shaken it as a sign of respect. Mina quickly withdrew her hand. She turned away. She went back to her post. But Hannah saw it.
She saw how Mina walked, not with a measured stride, just an ordinary one, a human one.
Her back was slightly less straight. Her shoulders were slightly slumped, not out of weakness, but because for the first time in a long time, she didn't have to keep them straight. Someone else was holding them now. The next day, the real construction work began. Sophie was given a hammer, a saw, and nails, and she was happier than Hannah had ever seen her. She stood there with the hammer in her hand, smiling. Sophie Chen, engineer, tattoos, swear words, a smile that appeared only at the sight of tools. She started with the side panels, the very ones Hannah had promised Keiko and Daria. Then the side panels turned into partitions, partitions into walls, walls into small compartments. Not rooms, but something like that. A space for each of them. Small, 1 meter by 2, boards on 3 sides, a fabric curtain on the 4th. Her own corner, a place to retreat to close the curtain, to be alone. That changed everything. When a person can close the curtain, they cease to be a cornered animal. They become a resident, someone who has a home, even if it's just 1 meter by 2,
Even if it's made of planks and rags, but a home.
Hannah watched as people changed, how their shoulders straightened, how smiles appeared, how things began to appear in the little cubicles. Natasha hung a drawing of a jellyfish on the wall. Rin placed a stone she'd found at the bottom of a dumpster by the entrance. Smooth, black. She said it was her talisman. Lila hung a scrap of fabric as a curtain and sang quietly behind it in the evenings so that only she could hear. Vivian organized her compartment like an office. Records on the walls. Inventory. Schedules. Everything was neat. Everything was orderly. She put Clara in charge of monitoring water usage. Estelle was in charge of groceries. Margot was in charge of medicine. 4 rich girls who, 3 weeks ago, didn't know how to wash dishes were now managing the Raft's finances. And they did it well. Because it turned out that counting money and counting water are the same skill. It's just different. By the end of the 5th week, a school had appeared on the Raft. It was Lila's idea. She came to Hannah in the evening and said that 3 teenage girls on the Raft were doing nothing all day long. Julie sews.
But the other 2,
Yuna, 15 from Korea, and Maria, 16 from Mexico. They just sit there, talking, bored. And boredom on a raft is dangerous. Boredom is a void that thoughts crawl into. Bad thoughts. Hannah thought about it. Then she agreed. Lila began teaching. Not algebra, not history. She taught songs. In Tagalog, in English, in Spanish. She taught rhythm, melody, breathing. The 3 girls sat in front of her on crates and sang. Out of tune. Loudly. Awfully. And they laughed. Then Rin began teaching them how to cook. What's edible? What isn't? How to tell if something's fresh by its smell. How to cut properly so as not to cut yourself. Natasha taught biology. She showed them jellyfish. Explained what bioluminescence is. talked about mollusks, about algae, about an ecosystem that shouldn't exist but does. A school on a raft. 3 students, 4 teachers. A desk made from an upside-down crate. A blackboard made from a piece of plastic. Chalk made from a crushed mollusk. Madness. Beautiful madness. Julie joined us on the 3rd day. Silently. She just sat down next to Yuna. She didn't sing. She didn't speak. She listened. Lila didn't force her.
She just continued the lesson. On the 5th day, Julie sang along.
Quietly, just with her lips, but she sang along. Hannah stood 10 meters away, drawing up the schedule, and heard how a 14-year-old girl from France was moving her lips in time to a Filipino lullaby, and inside her was something huge and warm and painful all at once. A thought flashed through her mind. Trust, 64%. Event, education, socialization of minors. Critical threshold, close, 64%, less than a month and a half. Hannah didn't know what a critical threshold, but she knew she'd find out soon. On the night of the 38th day, she found out. The interface woke her up, not with text, with a map. For the first time ever, the system displayed a map, a schematic one, a simple one. Blue lines on a dark background, their raft in the center, a tiny dot, surrounded by the ocean. The storm hit on the 43rd day, not the kind of storm you can prepare for, not rain, not wind, a catastrophe. The sky turned black in 20 minutes. It didn't just get cloudy, it turned black, as if someone had turned off the lights.
The wind struck from the west with such force that the first gust knocked 4 people off their feet.
The waves rose instantly. 1 meter, 2, 3. The gray-green expanse turned into a mountain range of water. Hannah shouted orders. Her voice was drowned out by the roar of the wind. Mina stood on the right flank and was screaming so hard her vocal cords were about to snap. Everyone to their stations. Tie yourselves down. Hold on to each other. Sophie ran toward the joints between the containers. She knew the cables at the southeast joint would snap first. That's where she ran, with a hammer in one hand and a rope in the other. Ayana grabbed the first aid kit and clutched it to her chest. Medicines are more precious than gold. Losing the first aid kit meant losing everything. Rin was putting out the fire in the kitchen. She was dousing it with water. Because a burning suitcase lid in a storm is a fire on a raft. Natasha grabbed containers of fresh water and dragged them to the center, to the safest spot. Lila gathered 3 teenage girls and led them downstairs, into the gap between the containers. It was cramped, wet, but the wind couldn't reach them there.
Hannah stood in the center.
She counted the people. 1, 2, 10, 20, 30, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44. Everyone was there. Everyone was alive, for now. The first wave completely engulfed the raft. Hannah went underwater, head first. Salty, icy darkness. Her hands grabbed something. A plank. A rope. It didn't matter. She held on. The wave receded. Hannah surfaced. She coughed. Her eyes stung from the salt. Her glasses were miraculously still on. Julie's thread hadn't let her down. The second wave, the 3rd, the 10th. Hannah stopped counting. Time blurred. There were no minutes. There were no hours. There was a storm. Endless. Tearing. Dragging. Grinding. Somewhere to her left there was a loud crack. Like a gunshot. The southeast section. The rope snapped. Sophie was there. Hannah shouted her name. The wind carried the scream away. She crawled over there, across the wet planks, on all fours, because it was impossible to stand. She found Sophie. She was hanging from the cable over the water, with one hand. With the other, she was holding a hammer. A wave had torn off the edge of the section, and it was now dangling like a door on a single hinge.
If it came loose completely,
They'd lose a third of the raft, along with 5 compartments, along with their belongings, along with people if anyone hadn't managed to get away. Hannah grabbed Sophie by the hand. She pulled. Sophie cursed. She said she needed a rope. Not help. A rope. To tie the joint back together. Hannah shouted back. Someone passed a rope. Down the line. From hand to hand. Through the storm. Sophie grabbed the rope with her teeth. Her hands were full. She hung over the water. She tied off the joint. She drove a wedge in with a hammer. The section held. Barely. But it held. Hannah pulled Sophie up onto the deck. They lay on the wet planks and caught their breath. Sophie said it had been fun. Hannah said that they had different ideas about what fun meant. Sophie laughed. In the middle of a storm, lying on the wet planks, with a hammer in her hand, she laughed. The storm lasted 3 days. Not continuously, in waves. A blow. An hour of calm. A blow. 2 hours of calm. A blow. Hannah didn't sleep. Not for a minute. She stood in the center of the raft and coordinated everything. Who goes where? Who holds whom? Who relieves whom? Mina stood next to her.
She wasn't sleeping either. They worked like two clockworks, in sync, without words.
Hannah pointed the way. Mina gave orders. Hannah counted the people. Mina checked the posts. Hannah thought. Mina acted. They didn't say a word to each other except for names and numbers. But it was a greater partnership than any conversation. On the second night, water began to rise inside the raft. The gaps between the planks were letting it in. Slowly, but steadily. By morning, there were 10 centimeters of water on the deck. Ayana worked non-stop. Cuts from the planks. Bruises from blows. One dislocated arm. One split forehead. 2 girls in shock who couldn't move, sitting with their arms wrapped around their knees and rocking back and forth. Ayana treated them, bandaged them, calmed them down. Her 2 assistants, whom she had trained, worked alongside her. They did what she had taught them. They gave them water. They checked their pupils. They took their pulses. Ayana looked at them in the middle of the storm's second night and thought it hadn't been in vain. That the training hadn't been in vain.
That Hannah had been right when she said, "You're not alone."
On the third night, the wind changed direction. It blew from the north. The raft listed. Abruptly, 20 degrees. Everything that wasn't secured flew into the water. Boxes, tools, supplies. Hannah saw 3 bottles of water roll across the deck and fall overboard. 3 liters. 3 precious liters. Natasha jumped after them. No rope. No safety line. She just jumped. Mina screamed so loud you could hear her through the storm. Hannah darted to the rail. 2 girls nearby grabbed a rope and threw it. Natasha caught it. With one hand. The other held the bottles close to her chest. 2 out of 3. The third was swept away. They pulled her out. She lay on the deck, blue from the cold, with 2 bottles of water pressed to her chest like babies. Hannah stood over her, her hands shaking. Not from the cold, from anger. She wanted to yell at Natasha. She wanted to say that this was madness, that her life was worth more than 3 liters, that if she had drowned, trust would have crumbled and the raft would have lost more than 3 bottles. But she didn't say any of that, because Natasha was lying there, looking up at her and smiling, and saying she'd caught them. 2 out of 3. Not bad for a biologist. Hannah sat down beside her, covered her with something. A jacket, a rag, it didn't matter. She sat there and held her hand until Natasha stopped shaking. Trust, 67%. 3%. For not screaming. For sitting down next to her. For holding her hand. On the 4th morning, the storm died down, as if someone had turned it off. A second ago, the wind was tearing at her hair, and now, silence. Absolute. Deafening. Hannah stood on the deck and heard nothing but the ringing in her ears. Then she heard it. Breathing. Crying. Moans. Coughing. Sounds of life. She began to count. 1, 1, 2, 10, 20, 30, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44. Everyone. Every single one. Alive. Hannah stood in the middle of the wrecked raft. 2 sections torn off. Half the supplies overboard. The water purifier smashed. The sail made of dresses torn. The galley washed away. Everything they'd spent a month building. A month of work. A month of sweat. A month of trust. Half of it destroyed in 3 days. But everyone was alive. 44. Not a single one lost. Hannah wanted to say something. She opened her mouth and couldn't. Her voice failed her. Her vocal cords had given out after 3 days of screaming into the storm. She stood on a crate in the center with her mouth open, but no sound came out. Then Lila began to sing softly, an old lullaby in Tagalog, the very same one she'd sung on the first night. Her voice was hoarse, broken, but recognizable. Ayana joined in Yoruba, a different melody, but the same lullaby. Sophie began to hum something. She wasn't singing. She didn't know how. She was just humming the melody. Julie, 14-year-old Julie, who had spoken her first word 20 days ago. She began to sing in French, quietly, clearly, clear, a voice as thin as a thread, but strong. Mina Park, who had never sung in front of people. She began in Korean, low, steady, like a hymn. Voices joined in, one by one, in Spanish, in Japanese, in Ukrainian, in German, in Hindi, in Arabic, in Swahili. 44 voices, in 11 languages, one melody, different, yet one. The raft rocked, slowly, in time, as if the ocean were listening. Hannah sat down on the wet planks, and for the first time since that first day, she cried. Not from pain, not from exhaustion, not from fear, from something for which there was still no word. The interface flashed, quietly, briefly, almost tenderly. Trust, 87%. Node stabilized. Congratulations. Hannah sat on the wet planks and cried, and around her 43 women were singing, and trust was 87%, and she was 22 years old, and she sat with her glasses, held in place by a string, in the middle of a broken raft in the middle of an impossible ocean, and she had no idea what to do next. But she knew one thing. They're here. All of them. And they're singing. After the storm, the recovery began. Hannah called a meeting 2 hours after the sky cleared. She still had no voice, so she wrote, with charcoal on wet plastic. Short words, clear instructions. Priority 1, water. The desalinator is broken. Repair it or build a new one. Priority 2, food. The kitchen has been washed away. Restore the fire. Priority 3, structure. 2 sections are torn off. Reattach or replace. Sophie looked at the list. She said she'd need 3 days for the desalinator, 2 for the kitchen, a week for the sections, 10 days total, minimum. Hannah wrote 5. Sophie stared at her. Hannah wrote, "Give me a list of what's needed." Sophie cursed. Then she sat down and wrote it. Hannah read it. She submitted a request. Materials are needed to restore the infrastructure. The interface flashed. Trust, 87%. Access level, extended. Open, container number 8. Contents, plastic film, 3 rolls. Nylon rope, 30 meters. Toolkit, adjustable wrench, pliers, wire cutters. Hannah walked over to container 8. It was lying on its side at the very edge of the raft. Before the storm, no one had gone near it. They thought it was empty. Inside was exactly what the interface had shown. Plastic sheeting, rope, tools. Sophie saw the adjustable wrench and pressed it to her chest, like a child. She said she'd be able to finish in 4 days now. Hannah wrote 3. Sophie cursed longer and more creatively than usual. Then she went to work. The repairs were going faster than Hannah had expected. Not because it had gotten easier, but because the people had changed. The storm had done to them what no schedule ever could. It had shown them what they were capable of. 3 nights in hell, and not a single one gave up. Not a single one lay down and said it was all over. Not a single one jumped overboard. They screamed. They cried. They threw up from the pitching, but they held on. And now they knew they could hold on. That changed everything. Vivian, who 3 weeks ago couldn't even hold a bottle on the edge of the raft, was now standing knee-deep in the water, passing planks down the line. Her hands were scraped raw. Her nails were broken. She didn't complain. Estelle had learned to tie knots, sailing knots, real ones. Mina had shown her on the first day of the storm, and Estelle had remembered. Now she tied them faster than some of the others. Margot discovered she could dive, deep. For a long time, she used to do free diving, in the Maldives, for money. Now she was diving for wood, plastic, and metal, for anything that might come in handy. Clara kept track of everything with maniacal precision. Every nail, every meter of rope, every drop of water. She created a system she wouldn't be ashamed to show to any accountant in the world. On a piece of plastic, with a piece of charcoal. 4 rich women. 4 women who, before the disaster, had never done manual labor. Now they were working. And not just working, they were working well. On the third day after the storm, Lila approached Hana. In the evening, when Hana was sitting at the edge with a needle, Julie was next to her. Both were sewing, in silence, as always. Lila sat down on the other side. She paused. Then she said quietly that she wanted to tell her something. Hana turned toward her. Lila was looking at the water, not at Hana. Her voice was steady, too steady, controlled. She said she'd had a son, a little boy, 3 years old. His name was Marcos. He died 6 years ago. He drowned, in the pool. She looked away for a minute, just 1 minute, and when she turned back, it was too late. Hana was silent. Lila spoke, quietly, calmly, as if she were talking about someone else. She said that after that, she stopped being a teacher. She stopped being around children. She went to sing in a bar. Because in a bar, no one asks how you're doing. In a bar, you sing and smile, and everyone thinks you're happy. Lila paused. Then she said that when Hana asked her to teach the children on the raft, she almost refused. She almost ran away. She almost said no. Because being around Yuna, Maria, and Julie was like standing at the edge of the pool all over again. But she didn't refuse, because Hana didn't force her. Hana asked,
And that was different. Lila turned to Hana. Her eyes were wet, but not red, not tearful, just wet. She said, "Thank you." Hana said, "You're welcome." Lila shook her head. She said that Hana didn't understand. Thank you not for asking her to teach. Thank you for asking her to teach exactly when it was needed. Not before, not after. Exactly when Lila was ready. Hana was silent. She couldn't say that she knew, that the card had prompted her, that the system had shown need to be needed by the children, that she hadn't guessed the moment but had read it on the interface. She couldn't say that, so she just nodded. Lila wiped her eyes. She stood up. She left. Julie was sitting nearby, sewing. She'd heard everything. Hana knew she'd heard it, but Julie didn't turn around. She didn't say a word. She just sewed a little faster, the stitches a little tighter, as if she were putting something into every stitch. On the fourth day after the storm, the desalinator started working. A new one, better than the old one. Sophie had built it out of 2 containers, 3 layers of plastic sheeting, and a system of tubes made from cut-up hoses from the rescue modules. 5 liters a day, not 2, 5. Sophie stood next to it and waited for the first drop. A drop fell into the container. Clear, clear. Sophie didn't curse. For the first time ever. She just stood there and watched. Hana walked over. She said it was the best desalinator in the world. Sophie snorted and said it was the best desalinator in this world. Because there aren't any others here. Then she quietly added that Hana didn't have to tell her she was doing a great job every single time. That she wasn't a dog who needs praise. Hana replied that she didn't say it every time. Only when Sophie really did a good job. And she really had done a good job. Sophie turned away. Her ears were red. She left. The card flashed. Sophie Chen. Drawn to Hana So. Intensity rising. Hana sighed. Then she went to check on the kitchen. Rin had rebuilt the kitchen in 2 days. A new hearth. Bigger, more stable. With a canopy made of plastic sheeting to keep out the rain and wind. Rin was standing by the hearth cooking soup. Made from shellfish. From seaweed. From something Natasha had found on the seabed and identified as probably safe sea root. The soup smelled strange but good. Hot. Lively. Food. Rin handed out portions to each person's hands, by name. She knew all 44 names. Knew who didn't eat seaweed, who couldn't handle spicy food, who needed a bigger portion because she dived and burned more calories. Rin was a cook, a real one. Not just someone who prepares food, someone who feeds people. The difference was huge. Hana saw that difference every day. On the 5th day after the storm, something else happened. Hana discovered that one of the girls had a fever. Her name was Park So-hyun, 29 years old, quiet, unobtrusive, one of those who does her job and doesn't complain. She didn't complain this time either. She just collapsed, right in the middle of the deck. Ayana was by her side within seconds, a temperature of 39.2, a red throat, a cough. Ayana looked at Hana. She said one word, infection. Hana felt a chill run down her spine. An infection on the raft. 44 people crammed together. 1 first aid kit. 0 antibiotics. No, not 0. Hana remembered. The first day. A pile on the crate. Someone had left a pack of birth control pills.
with an antibiotic in the formula. She rushed to the records. Clara pulled up the records from the first day. Found it.
Amoxicillin. As part of a combination drug, 14 pills. 2 had been used. 12 remained.
Ayana took the pills. She looked at the dosage. She shook her head. She said that wasn't enough for a full course of treatment, but it would be enough to clear the infection if they started now. Hana told her to start. Ayana began. Park So-hyun lay in the medical corner for 3 days. Her fever broke on the second day. On the third, she got up. Weak, pale, but alive. Ayana stood by her side and didn't leave for a single minute. Her assistants took care of the others, and Ayana sat next to So-hyun. She changed her compresses. She gave her water. She checked her pulse. Not because she had to check it every 5 minutes. Because she couldn't leave. Because every patient she'd lost at the hospital before the disaster was now standing right behind her, and she wasn't going to add another one to that list. When So-hyun got up, Ayana went out onto the deck. She looked up at the sky, and she burst into tears. Quietly, briefly, for 2 minutes. Then she wiped her face. She straightened up and went to check on the next patient. Hana saw this from behind the container. She didn't approach.
She didn't interfere.
Some tears should be private. The interface displayed Trust, 89%. Event, Medical Crisis. Outcome, Survival. Resource Discovery, Container 9. Contents, Seeds, Wheat, Chia, Sunflower, Zucchini, Basil. Seeds. Hana stood in front of Container 9, looking at the little packets of seeds and thinking it was impossible. That containers on a cargo ship don't carry seeds in little packets. That this wasn't a coincidence. That the system puts exactly what's needed here, exactly when it's needed. Or that the system reveals what has always been here. The difference matters. But it doesn't matter right now. What matters now is that they have seeds. Natasha saw the packets and screamed. She fell to her knees. She grabbed the packet of chia. She pressed it to her chest. She said they could grow them, that she needed a container and soil. There's no soil, but there's seaweed, rotten, as a growing medium, and fresh water, and the sun, lots of sun. She can set up a hydroponic system. Hana told her to go ahead. The second month was a month of building, not restoration, building, something that hadn't been there before.
Hana looked at the raft and saw that it had ceased to be a raft. It was becoming something else, a place. Sophie worked non-stop, not alone. Now she had a crew. 3 girls she'd trained, who knew how to wield a hammer, tie knots and cut plastic sheeting, and didn't argue while doing it, although one of them started to. Sophie was proud. The raft was expanding, not outward, upward. A second level, a platform above the containers, made of planks and debris and everything Margot had fished out from the bottom. It was dry up there. Windy, but dry. That's where they set up Natasha's hydroponics. Sun all day long. The seeds sprouted on the 4th day. Green dots in bottles filled with algae substrate. Chia, wheat, basil. Tiny, delicate, unbelievable. Natasha circled around them like a mother tending to newborns. She checked on them every hour, measured their growth, jotted down notes in her notebook, took photos. No, she drew them. There were no cameras on the raft. Rin looked at the sprouts and was already planning the menu. Basil soup, wheat porridge, chia sprout salad. She spoke about it so seriously, as if she were planning the menu for a Michelin-starred restaurant. Natasha said the harvest was at least 2 months away.
Rin said she'd wait. She'd waited 20 years for her restaurant. She could wait 2 months. Something had developed between Rin and Natasha. Not friendship, a partnership. A chef and a farmer. The oldest bond in the history of civilization. One grows the food, the other prepares it. Between them lies what no society can function without, the kitchen and the garden. Hana saw this and thought that civilization doesn't begin with laws or armies or money. It begins with someone planting grain and someone else knowing how to turn it into bread. The smokehouse appeared on the 48th day. The idea was Rin's. The execution was Sophie's. A small box with a grate inside and a chimney made from a pipe. The fuel was dry seaweed. The smoke was salty and strange. But the fish inside it turned into something firm, dry, and long-lasting. The first smoked fish lasted 3 days, then 5, then a week. Supplies. Real supplies. Not we won't make it to tomorrow. Enough to last a week ahead. Hana stood in front of the smokehouse and thought it was the most beautiful box she'd ever seen in her life. On the 50th day, Mina came to see Hana in the evening. Not on business, not with a report, not with a problem. She just came. They sat on the edge of the raft. The sunset was green, as always. Mina was silent for a long time. Then she said she wanted to tell her something. Hana turned toward her. Mina was looking at the horizon. Her back was straight, hands on her knees. Her face was stony, as always. But her voice wasn't. Her voice trembled. Mina said she'd been married twice. The first time at 22, the second at 30. Both times it didn't work out. Her first husband left because she worked too much. The second left because she felt too little. Those were his words. She felt too little. She said he was right, that she'd forgotten how to feel somewhere between her first shift and her 100th. It's easier not to feel when your job is to smile at strangers and serve food and pretend you care which plate their salad is on. 20 years. 20 years of professional smiles, nothing underneath, emptiness. Then she fell silent. Then she said that here on the raft, for the first time in 20 years, there was something here, beneath the smile, or without the smile.
Because here she doesn't smile professionally. Here she yells at people and gives orders and checks on the stations and argues with Sophie over the renovation schedule. And this is real. For the first time in 20 years, it's real. Hana listened. Mina turned toward her. Her eyes were dry. Mina wasn't the type to cry, but there was something in them. Something open, vulnerable. She said quietly that she'd wanted to hate Hana. That on the first day, when that girl in glasses stood on a crate and started giving orders, Mina had wanted to hate her. Because that was her job, her role, her purpose. And some college student had taken it away in 10 minutes. Hana nodded. She said she knew. Mina said she was glad she hadn't been able to. Hana nodded again. They sat side by side. The sunset glowed green and copper. The ocean was calm. Then Mina placed her hand next to Hana's. Not on top of it, next to it. 2 centimeters. Hana looked at their hands. Her own. Mina's. 2 centimeters. She didn't move her hand. Didn't pull it away. Didn't move it closer. She left it there. 2 centimeters. For now. A thought flashed through her mind. Mina Park. Reaching out to Hana So. Type, partnership. Transitioning to undefined. Hana ignored the interface. Again. On the 52nd day, Hana finally did what she'd been putting off. She told them about the map. Not everyone. The 7. The key people. A meeting. In the evening. She sat down and said she had information about other rafts. Everyone fell silent. Mina asked where it came from. And there it was. The moment. Hana stood between truth and a lie. She couldn't tell them about the interface. Not now. But she could tell them part of the truth. She said she had a way of sensing certain things. She didn't explain how. She said it had been that way since day one. That it helped her make decisions. That it wasn't magic but something like intuition. Only more precise. That she couldn't explain anymore. Not yet. But that she had never lied and had no intention of doing so. And that right now she sensed that 340 kilometers to the southeast, there was another raft. With a different leader. With a different group. And that it was moving parallel to them. Silence. A long one. Mina looked at her. Her eyes narrowed. Appraisingly. Sophie crossed her arms. Skeptically. Natasha leaned forward. With interest. Ayana was calm. Rin was neutral. Lila had a slight smile. Vivian looked suspicious. Mina was the first to speak. She asked why Hana hadn't told them sooner. Hana told the truth. Because she didn't know how. Because she was afraid they wouldn't believe her. Because it sounds crazy. Mina was silent for a moment. Then she said that on the raft in the middle of another dimension, where jellyfish are the size of buses and shadows dive beneath the hull, crazy is a relative concept. Sophie snorted. She said that if Hana says she senses another raft, she believes her, because Hana has never been wrong, not once, in 52 days. Natasha said that as a biologist she couldn't explain it, but as a member of the crew, she didn't care about explanations. If it works, it works.
Ayana nodded. She said quietly that she trusted Hana. Rin said that the captain knew what she was doing. Lila smiled and said that everyone had their own talents. Vivian was silent for a moment. Then she said she wanted to record the coordinates for the log. Hana dictated them. 340 kilometers southeast, 520 kilometers north, 190 kilometers west, 3 rafts.
Vivian wrote it down.
With charcoal, on plastic, like everything else in this world. The interface flashed. Trust, 91%. Partial disclosure, accepted. Warning, full disclosure will increase trust by +5 or decrease it by -15. Uncertainty. Hana read the warning. +5 or -15. The whole truth is a gamble. If they believe her, trust will soar. If not, it will plummet. And she'll lose everything. Not now. Later. When she's ready. When they're ready. Hana closed her eyes. She exhaled. 91%. 2 months ago it was 0, and now 91. And 3 dots on the map that might be waiting. On the 54th day, Hana stood on the upper platform and looked down at the raft from above. At the kitchen where Rin was cooking soup. At the medical corner where Ayana was checking supplies. At the workshop where Sophie was arguing with a pipe. At the hydroponics area where Natasha was talking to the seedlings. At the school where Lila was singing with 3 girls. At the accounting department where Vivian and Clara were checking the numbers. At the edge of the raft where Julie was sewing. At the guard posts where the officers on duty stood.
At the compartments where those who had worked the night shift were sleeping. At the clotheslines. At the sail made of dresses. At the white flag on the container. 44 women. Each in her place. Each with a task. Each indispensable. On the 56th day, Hana announced the expedition. Not at a meeting, at a general assembly. All 44 of them. She stood on a crate and said that 190 kilometers to the west, there was another raft. That there were people on it. That this raft was in trouble. And that she wanted to send a reconnaissance team. Not the whole raft, a small detachment, on a small raft. Silence. Then questions. Who would go? How many there would be? How far? How long? What if they didn't return? Hana answered. 4 people. On the small satellite raft that Sophie had been building for the past week. 3 by 4 meters. With a sail. With a 10-day supply of water. With dried fish. With a compass that doesn't work but with a direction that Hana knows. Mina asked where she knew it from. Hana said she could sense it, just like she'd sensed the shellfish under the container. Just like she'd sensed the first aid kit in the Doubleday. Mina looked at her for a long time. Then she nodded.
She had long since stopped asking how Hana knew things. She simply accepted that Hana knew. Sophie volunteered first. She said she wouldn't let her raft go without her. She built it and she'd steer it. Natasha volunteered second. She said she wanted to see what was out there. Keiko volunteered third. A former swimmer, she was right at home in the water. Hana said she'd swim out herself. Mina said no. Her voice was steely. No discussion. The captain doesn't leave the ship. Hana looked at her. Mina stood with her back straight and her fists clenched, and in her eyes was something Hana had seen before. Fear, not for the raft but for her. Hana wanted to argue. Then she looked at the 43 faces around her. They were all looking at her the same way, unwavering. She was needed here, not there. Here. Hana swallowed. She nodded. She appointed Daria as the 4th member instead of herself. Strong. Calm. She knows how to dive. She knows how to keep her cool. 4 people. Sophie, Natasha, Keiko, Daria. The little companion raft was small, crooked, and beautiful. Sophie had built it from 2 sections that had been torn off by the storm. She had fastened them together, reinforced them. She'd set up a mast made from a pipe, a sail made from a piece of tarpaulin, a rudder made from an oar. It wasn't pretty, but it floated. They set their departure for dawn on the 58th day. The evening before they set sail, Hana sat with Sophie on the upper deck. Sophie was silent. She was going through her tools, checking each one. An adjustable wrench, pliers, a hammer. It was like a ritual. Hana said she wanted Sophie to know something. Sophie looked at her. Hana said that without her, this raft would be nothing but a pile of junk. That every plank, every nail, and every rope was Sophie, and that if anything happened to her, Hana wouldn't survive it. Sophie was silent. For a long time. Then she said quietly that Hana shouldn't say things like that, because it sounded like a goodbye. And she wasn't going to die. She was going to row out there, fix someone else's raft and come back. Because who else was going to fix that stupid desalinator that was leaking again? Hana smiled. Sophie didn't smile, but her ears turned red. In the morning, they set sail. Hana stood at the edge of the raft and watched as the little raft with a canvas sail drift away toward the west. 4 figures on it. Sophie at the helm, Natasha at the bow, Keiko and Daria on either side. They grew smaller and smaller. A dot, a blur, a shadow. Nothing. The horizon. Empty. Hana stood there, staring at the empty horizon, and she felt a chill inside. She turned around. 40 women were looking at her, waiting. She adjusted her glasses and said, "Okay." Today's schedule. And life went on. Without Sophie, the raft creaked differently. Without Natasha, the hydroponic system was orphaned. Yuna took charge of the seedlings. She managed, but not quite the same. Not with the same passion. Without Keiko and Daria, there were fewer divers. Margot dived alone. 3 days? 5? A week. The interface showed a dot on the map. A small one. Moving westward. Slowly, but moving. They were sailing. Alive. Hana stared at the dot every night, as if it were a candle. On the 8th day, the dot stopped. Hana held her breath. Then the dot flickered, and a second one appeared next to it. An unstable node. They had made it. Hana exhaled. Her hands were shaking. She went out on deck. It was 4 in the morning. Mina was standing guard. She saw Hana. She could tell by the look on her face. She asked with a single word. Hana nodded. They'd made it. Mina closed her eyes for a second. Then she opened them and continued her rounds, as if nothing had happened. But Hana saw it. She saw her shoulders relax, by a millimeter. 2 days later, the dot on the map moved back, and a second one moved alongside it. They were returning, together. Hana waited at the edge of the raft every morning. On the 13th day, she saw a sail. Not black, white, their canvas. And a second one nearby. Smaller, darker, but not black, gray. They were sailing parallel to each other, 2 small rafts, side by side. The raft erupted in a cry when they saw them. 40 women on deck. They were screaming, waving, crying. Hana stood quietly and counted the figures. There were 4 on their raft. Sophie, Natasha, Keiko, Daria. That's all. On the second raft, Hana counted. 7. 7 people. 7 women. When the rafts pulled up to the shore, Sophie jumped off first. She looked at Hana. She said the raft to the west was in bad shape. 23 people. 7 of them decided to go with them. The remaining 16 stayed behind. They had their own group, their own leader. A girl named Yuki Hamada, 26 years old, from Japan. She also had an interface. Hana froze. Sophie said that Yuki had sent a message. For Hana. 1 word. Sophie didn't understand what it meant, but Yuki said Hana would understand. The word was archipelago. Hana understood. The interface flashed. Node 4, stabilized, contact established, network, initialized. The network. 2 nodes, 2 rafts, connected. Not merged, not absorbed. 7 new mouths, 7 new stories, 7 new problems. Hana thought it would be easier, that the system was fine-tuned, that the schedule worked, that roles were assigned. She was wrong. The newcomers didn't fit in. Not because they didn't want to, because they were used to something different. There was no schedule on their raft. There were no roles. There was one girl who decided everything, Yuki. And when Yuki couldn't handle it, everyone just waited. They did nothing. They waited until the leader told them what to do. Hana saw this and learned. The first day. 44 women on the raft. Not a single one knew what to do. Everyone was waiting. Only back then, she was just like them. Not anymore. Now she knew. The problem was that knowing wasn't enough. The others needed to know too. Hana assigned a mentor to each of the 7. Not a boss, a mentor. Rin took 2 of them to the kitchen. She showed them how to clean mussels, how to cut seaweed, how to tend the fire. One of the newcomers, Eva, 20 years old, from Spain. It was the first time in 3 months she'd eaten a hot meal on that raft. When Rin gave her a bowl of soup, Eva held the bowl and stared at it, unable to start eating.
Because on their raft, they weren't given any food. You had to take the food, whoever was fastest. Here, food was given out, by name. Rin said, "Eva, here's your portion," by name. Eva burst into tears into her soup. Rin pretended not to notice. She added another half a ladleful for her. Ayana took one. A medic. Or rather, a girl who wanted to be a medic. Layla, 23 years old, Lebanon. On her raft, she'd bandaged wounds as best she could, without any training, without any tools, using scraps of cloth and seawater. When Ayana showed her the first aid kit, Layla stood there, touching the bandages with her fingertips, as if it were a sacred object. Ayana gave her a lab coat. Not a real one that Julie had sewn from an old shirt. White. Almost. Layla put it on and stood up straight. She became 2 centimeters taller. Clothes make the man, even on a raft. The adjustment period lasted 2 weeks. Difficult weeks, full of conflict. The newcomers didn't understand why they couldn't water whenever you wanted. The old-timers didn't understand why the newcomers didn't get it. Hana stood between them and translated. Not from one language to another. From one culture to another. From every man for himself to, we're in this together. On the 63rd day, something happened that Hana hadn't expected. Julie approached one of the newcomers, the youngest one, a 13-year-old girl named Anika, from Germany. Quiet, withdrawn, sitting in the corner. Julie walked over, sat down next to her, silently, and began to sew. Just like Hana had once done, right there, without words, without questions. She just sat down and started sewing. Hana watched, and a lump formed in her throat. Julie was doing what Hana had done for her, passing it on. A ritual. Silence. Presence. The 14-year-old girl who, 2 months ago, had sat on the edge of the raft and said nothing, was now sitting next to another girl, silently teaching her that it was safe to be close. On the 5th evening, Annika picked up a needle. The interface flashed. Trust. 93%. Hana didn't know exactly what those 2% were for. For Julie. For Anya. For the transmission. For the fact that the system Hana had built had begun to function without her. That was the most important thing. Without her. People were helping people not because Hana had asked them to, but because they had learned to. The second half of the 3rd month. The raft had grown. 51 people. The 70th day. Hana stood on the upper platform and looked at what had once been a raft made of debris. Now it was a settlement. Small, crooked, salty, but a settlement. It had a name. Halcyon, in honor of the ship that was no more. It had a flag, an old silk shawl they'd found in a suitcase during the 2nd week, blue with golden birds. Lila hung it on the mast and said it was right. The Halcyon bird. The kingfisher. The one that nests above the water. It had laws. 6 points. Written by everyone together. Hannah suggested them. Mina edited them. Sophie said the 4th point was silly. Natasha said the 5th was obvious. Rin said the 6th needed to be rewritten. Lila said all 6 were wonderful. Vivian said they needed to be numbered. Julie didn't say anything but nodded. The rules were simple. First, everyone has the right to food, water, and a place to stay. Second, everyone works according to the schedule. The schedule is fair. Third, decisions are made collectively. Everyone's vote counts equally. Fourth, theft is not punished if admitted voluntarily. Fifth, no one is left alone unless they want to be. Sixth, the captain can be replaced at any time by a vote. Hannah looked at these 6 points written in charcoal on a piece of white plastic and thought that all of humanity's constitutional experience had boiled down to 6 sentences on a raft, and that this was enough. On the 73rd day, Rin announced that the first harvest was ready. Chia sprouts. Tiny. Green. Alive. Rin gathered them with the delicacy of a surgeon, chopped them up, added them to the soup. Clam soup with chia sprouts and dried seaweed. Each of them received a serving, a small one, but with greens. With real living greens grown by their own hands on their raft. Natasha stood nearby beaming, not because of the interface, because of pride. Her sprouts, her farm, her hands.
She looked at Hannah. Hannah raised her bowl, like a toast. Natasha laughed. Loudly, infectiously. She hadn't laughed like that since the very first day. On the 75th day, Hannah learned the truth about Ayame Kurode. Not from the interface, from Rachel. The collectors had returned, not with black sails, with gray ones. A single raft. Rachel alone, unarmed, without a crew. She rowed up to the side and asked to come aboard. Mina wanted to refuse. Hannah said to let her. Rachel climbed aboard. She looked worse than last time. Thinner. Older. Her eyes even emptier. She said she hadn't come for food. She'd come to tell them, because Hannah needed to know. They sat on the upper deck, alone. Mina stood below by the ladder, guarding. Not Hannah from Rachel. Rachel from everyone else. Rachel told her story. Ayame Kuroda. 20 years ago. Japan. The first known outpost in this ocean. 15 years ago. A small raft. 30 women. Ayame was quiet. Modest. Like Hannah. A manager. Like Hannah. Glasses. Like Hannah.
Rachel smirked.
Said that's probably just her type. Ayame held out for a year and a half. Built a raft. A community. A school. A farm. Everything. Then the gatherers came. Not Rachel. Others. Earlier. More vicious. They didn't want food. They wanted people. Ayame refused. They came again. Ayame refused. They came a third time and took 3 people in the night. Ayame went after them. Alone. She found their raft. She found the 3. She brought them back. But, to bring them back, she lied to the collectors. She said she knew where the treasure was hidden, that she'd show them in exchange for the people. There was no treasure. It was a lie. To save the 3. The system shut down, instantly. Just like with Rachel, only worse. Because Ayame was at 96%. A drop from 96 to 0 in a single second. The raft lost everything. Resources ceased to exist. The water ran out in 3 days. The farm withered away. Of the 30 women, 11 survived. Ayame was among them. But she ceased to be a node. She stopped seeing the cards. She stopped seeing trust. She ceased to be who she was. She lived for another 2 years. Then one night she went into the water. Quietly. Without saying goodbye. They never found her. Rachel knew this because 3 of those 11 ended up with her. On her raft. They told her. Hannah sat and listened, and inside her it was cold and quiet and empty. A lie for the sake of survival. A lie for the sake of 3, and 30 lives in exchange. The system showed no mercy. Not once. Under no circumstances. Not even when a lie was the only way to save people. It was cruel. It was unfair. It was the rule. Hannah asked why Rachel was telling her this. Rachel paused. Then she said she had 4 people left. Out of 9. 5 were gone. Some went who knows where. Some to other rafts. Some into the water. She had 4 women. Hungry. Tired. Without a system. Without resources. Without hope. And she's asking. Not demanding. Asking. For the first time in 11 years. To take them in. Hannah looked at Rachel. At the woman who had looted the rafts. Who had taken what didn't belong to her. Who was what Hannah could have become. And who was now sitting in front of her, asking. With empty eyes. With her hands on her knees. With a voice that didn't tremble only because there was nothing left to tremble. Hannah said yes. Without a discussion. Without a vote. Just yes. Then she added that Rachel could come too. Rachel raised her head. She looked at Hannah. For the first time during the entire conversation, something flashed in her eyes. Not hope. Surprise. She said she didn't deserve it. Hannah replied that it wasn't about deserving. It was about needing. On the 80th day, Hannah thought for the first time about what home meant. She was standing on the deck in the morning and heard sounds that hadn't existed a month ago. Rin was giving orders in the kitchen. 2 voices answered. Sophie was hammering somewhere to the right. Natasha was singing to the seedlings. She was literally singing. She said plants grow better with music. Lila laughed and said Natasha was off-key and the seedlings would wither faster. 3 teenage girls were sitting in the study corner. Yuna was solving a math problem that Vivian had come up with. Maria was drawing a map of the raft. Julie was sewing. Annika sat next to Julie and was sewing too. Silently. Side by side. 2 girls who had found each other through silence. Mina was making her morning rounds. Her voice was steady, clear, professional, but not harsh. No more than that, somewhere between a command and a concern. She was changing, slowly, like a glacier, but she was changing. Ayana sat in the medical corner and taught Layla how to apply a splint. They didn't have a real splint. They used a stick and a bandage. But the technique was correct. Ayana spoke softly, patiently, like a teacher who had finally found a student. Rachel sat on the edge and mended a net, a fishing net. She'd woven it herself in 2 days, from fishing line and rope. Her hands remembered. 11 years on the water. Hands remember even when everything else forgets. 55 people, and each in their place. Everyone is needed. Hannah adjusted her glasses and thought that this was home. Not the walls, not the roof, not the address. The people who do their usual things next to you in the morning. That's home. On the 83rd day, Amara arrived. 32 people. A raft. A big one. Well built. Better than the Halcyon in its early days. Amara had an engineer, and a carpenter, and 2 fishermen who knew what they were doing. Amara Diallo, 28 years old, Senegal, tall, with a shaved head, with a voice that sounded like a cello. She climbed aboard the Halcyon and looked around. A sail made of dresses, hydroponics, a smokehouse, a school, a medical corner, a schedule on a plastic board, a flag with golden birds. Then she looked at Hannah and smiled. She said she'd imagined Hannah to be taller. Hannah said she heard that a lot. Amara laughed. They talked for 3 hours. Not at a meeting, just the 2 of them. On the upper platform, Amara told her story. Her own platform, her own interface, her own cards, her own journey from 0 to 80% trust. She was different. Not a manager, a teacher. In her past life, she taught at a school in Dakar. Math. Her system worked through teaching. Every lesson built trust. Every skill passed on from one person to another added a percentage point. A different mechanism. The same principle. People grow when they help each other grow. Hannah shared her approach. Management, scheduling, employee profiles, and role assignments. Amara nodded. She said it was interesting that the system adapts to the individual, to what they do best. A manager gets managerial tools. A teacher gets teaching tools. They both silence, thinking the same thing. Who created this system? Who decides who will become a node? Who snatches women away a second before the point of no return and throws them into an ocean that doesn't exist? Amara said there was a woman on her raft, an old woman, 67 years old, Fatima. She's been here longer than anyone Amara has ever met. 22 years. And Fatima says the ocean isn't evil. It isn't good. It simply is. Like a river. A river doesn't decide whom to carry. It carries everyone, but where it takes them depends on who's swimming. Hannah thought about that. Then she asked about the depths, about the shadows. Amara nodded. She said they have them too. The shadows come. They watch. They leave. They never touch anyone. But with every month, they get closer. And Fatima says that one day they'll rise to the surface. And then it'll be time to decide. Hannah asked what to decide. Amara said she didn't know. Fatima doesn't say anything. She just smiles and says, "You'll find out when the time comes." The 2 rafts were side by side. 87 people, 2 hubs, 2 systems, 1 archipelago. They didn't merge. They decided to go their separate ways. Close by, within shouting distance, but each on their own. Amara steered her raft. Hannah steered hers. They shared resources, knowledge, people when necessary, but they didn't merge. Hannah remembered the warning, an archipelago. Not an empire, a confederation, not an absorption. On the 85th day, what Kana had been waiting for and fearing happened. At night, the shadows rose. Not like before, not deep, not far. Right beneath the raft, a meter from the bottom. Huge, dark purple, with pulsating pale spots. 3, 5, 10, more.
The entire raft glowed from below. People woke up. They went out on deck. They looked down. Fear, horror, screams. Someone ran toward the center. Someone clung to another. Mina yelled for everyone to stay where they were. Hana stood at the edge and looked down. The shadows didn't move. They simply were. Under the raft, around the raft, everywhere. And they were watching. Hana could feel it. She couldn't see their eyes, but she could feel their gaze. A gaze thousands of years old. Ancient, tired, curious. The interface flashed, brightly, brighter than ever. Depth, contact. Question, do you accept? Hana read, do you accept? What do you accept? The interface didn't specify.
Hana stood above the water, full of shadows,
And didn't know what to say. Amara stood beside her. She saw it too. The same question, in a different language, in a different interface, but the same one. Amara looked at Hana. Hana looked at Amara. They hadn't planned it. They hadn't discussed it. They just nodded to each other, and both answered at the same time. Yes, we accept. The shadows pulsed, brighter. Then they began to sink, slowly, deeper, deeper, until they dissolved into the darkness. The water calmed down. It turned gray-green again. Smooth, quiet. But something had changed. Hana could feel it. The air had grown warmer. The water was gentler. And on the horizon, right at the very edge, where the sky met the ocean, something was glowing. Not a sail, not a raft. Something big, green, motionless. Hana squinted. She adjusted her glasses. And for the first time in 3 months, she saw something that hadn't been in this ocean before. Land. The land was an island, a small one, green, with trees and a beach and a freshwater stream that flowed down from a low hill straight into the ocean. They reached it on the 99th day, 3 months at sea, 90 days, and now, land.
Hana stood at the bow, staring at the shore, unable to believe it. She didn't want to believe it, because if she believed it and it turned out to be a mirage, she wouldn't be able to bear it. But it wasn't a mirage. Sophie jumped down first. She stood on the sand, then dropped to her knees, then lay down, face down in the sand. And she lay there, in silence. The sand was warm, real, firm. It didn't sway. It didn't slip away from under their feet. Land. They came ashore all day long, one at a time, in pairs, in groups of 5, 55 from Halcyon, 32 from Amara's raft. 87 women stepped onto the shore of an island that didn't appear on any map in any world. Some were crying. Some were laughing. Some stood there touching the trees, the leaves, the grass. Real green grass. Like blind people who've regained their sight and can't believe what they're seeing. Natasha fell to her knees in front of a bush and cried. Because the bush, alive, with roots in the ground, not in a bottle with an algae substrate, in the ground. Rin found a stream and drank from it while kneeling. Fresh water, just flowing, just like that, without a desalinator, without tablets, without a rain sail made of dresses.
just water. Lila stood under a tree and sang. Not a lullaby, something else. Something joyful. Loudly. In Tagalog. 3 teenage girls were running along the beach. Yuna and Maria were shouting and laughing. Julie walked slowly. Barefoot. On the wet sand. Leaving footprints. Looking at them. Footprints on the ground. Her footprints. Annika walked beside her. Barefoot too. Silent too. 2 girls who had learned to be silent together. Mina stood on the beach and looked around. Her back was straight. Her hands were behind her back. Her face. Hana looked at her face and stopped. Mina was crying. Tears were streaming down her cheeks, and she didn't wipe them away. She stood at attention and cried. 20 years without tears. The second time in 3 months. The first time was on the raft when Hana sewed her uniform. These were on land. Hana approached. She stood beside her. Mina didn't turn around. She said quietly that she thought she'd never set foot on solid ground again. Hana said she thought so too. Mina turned to face her. Her eyes were wet. Red. Her face was more open than Hana had ever seen it. Mina said she didn't want to go back.
To the raft, to that life, to that Mina who smiled professionally and felt nothing. Hannah said that Mina had led them through the storm, that Mina had assigned the night shifts on the very first day, that Mina had held the right flank when everything was going overboard. Without that Mina, half of them wouldn't have made it to shore. Mina was silent. Then she said very quietly that Hannah was the only person who had ever seen anything in her besides the schedule. Hannah replied that she could see it, 2 centimeters between their hands. Just like back then, at sunset, on the raft. Mina looked at Hannah's hand and moved hers closer. Not by 2 centimeters, to 0. Their fingers touched. Mina's stiff, dry, strong fingers and Hannah's small fingers stained with ink. Hannah didn't pull her hand away. Mina didn't pull hers away. They stood on the beach, holding each other's hands. And 85 women around them were crying and laughing and touching the trees and drinking from the stream. And this was the first day of something new. Not the end, the beginning. The island was small, 1 kilometer long, half a kilometer wide, with a stream, with trees,
With a cave at the foot of the hill.
with berries, with birds, with soft soil you could plant in. For real, not in bottles, in the ground. Natasha walked around the island as if possessed. She collected samples, leaves, berries, soil, stones. She wrote everything down in a notebook. She ran out of pages. She started writing on tree bark. Sophie was already eyeing the cave appraisingly. She said she could reinforce it, expand it, turn it into a home. A real one, with a roof, with walls, with a door. Rin found berries and fruits, strange ones, unfamiliar, but edible. Natasha confirmed it. Rin said they were better than shellfish. Ayana found a plant that looked like aloe. She crushed a leaf, sniffed it, applied it to a scratch on her arm. An hour later, the scratch had healed. She looked at Hannah and said they now had an antiseptic, one that grew from the ground. In the evening, everyone sat on the beach. 87 women, 2 groups, 1 island. Rin prepared dinner, a real meal. Fish they'd caught from the rafts, berries from the island, hydroponically grown sprouts, soup made with fresh water from the stream, not desalinated water, fresh water, hot, thick, delicious. Everyone ate.
Everyone, in a circle, on the beach, under the trees, under the stars that were foreign but already familiar. Lila began to sing, a lullaby, that very one, in Tagalog, the one she'd sung on the first night, the one she sang after the storm. Voices joined in, one after another, in all the languages spoken on that beach. Hannah sat and listened. Next to her was Mina, next to her was Sophie, next to her was Ayana, next to her was Natasha, next to her was Lila, next to her was Julie who was singing, out loud, clearly, purely, in French. Next to her was Annika, who was singing along, quietly but singing along. Next to her was Rachel, who wasn't singing but was listening, with her eyes closed, with a face that, for the first time in 11 years, wasn't empty. There was something else there, perhaps peace. Next to her was Amara, who was singing in Wolof and smiling. Beside them were 80 people whom the world had written off, whom it had forgotten, whom it had lost, and who had found each other. Hannah adjusted her glasses. Julie's thread on the temple. It held, as always. The interface flickered, quietly, almost tenderly, for the last time in this arc. Trust, 98%. Node, stable. Network, 2 nodes. Archipelago, established. Depth, ally. Island, granted. Hannah So's node status, active. Next cycle, available. Decision rests with the host. Decision rests with the host. Hannah read it twice. Next cycle, so she could continue. She could pass it on. She could remain a node. Or leave. She thought. For a long time. She looked at the women around her. At Mina, who was holding her hand and wouldn't let go. At Sophie, who was sitting a little further away, sharpening some kind of tool and pretending not to look her way, even though she was. At Ayana, who was smiling quietly and, for the first time in years, didn't look tired. At Natasha, who was drawing in her notebook and swinging her legs like a child. At Lila, who was singing and crying at the same time, and these were real tears. At Julie, who was sitting up straight and sewing something small thing. Not for the raft, for Annika. A gift. The first gift Julie had ever made for anyone. At Rachel, who opened her eyes, looked at Hannah and nodded. Quietly.
like someone who had finally found land after 11 years at sea. Hannah closed her eyes, exhaled, then opened them again. She replied to the interface, not out loud, in her mind. I'm staying. The interface flashed, once, briefly, like a period at the end of a sentence. Accepted, and went dark. Not forever, just until morning. Because in the morning there would be a new day, new tasks, a new schedule, new problems. Where to house 87 people on the island, how to build houses, how to set up a water supply, how to grow crops in real soil, how to contact the third hub in the north, how to live. Not just survive, to live. But that's in the morning. Right now it's night. Right now it's the beach. Right now it's a song. Right now it's Mina's hand in hers. Warm, firm, real. Hannah was sitting on the sand, small, with her glasses slipping down her nose held in place by a string, with a crooked stitch on her pocket. The girl from the cafe in Seattle who knew how to make schedules and tally up grocery lists and figure out who couldn't stand next to whom at the stove, who won a cruise in a raffle and didn't have time to feed her cat, who woke up on a raft in someone's wet sneakers with a unicorn on the heel, who wrote her first schedule in lipstick on a piece of plastic, who never once lied, who woke up every day thinking the same thing.
No one should die on my shift. No one died. On her shift, not a single one. Hannah So, 22 years old, shift manager, captain of the Halcyon, the hub. She adjusted her glasses. She looked at the stars, others, strangers, her own. And she said quietly, just to herself, all right, tomorrow we'll make the schedule.